I've been in the trucking industry for 22 years, mostly on desert roads. People ask me why I always take these desolate routes. My answer is always the same, because no one bothers you here. There's no traffic, no blinding city lights, no cops hiding behind billboards trying to catch you for going 5 kilometers over the speed limit. Just you, your truck, and thousands of kilometers of empty space stretching out in every direction. The money's decent too, I won't lie. Companies pay extra for desert hauls because most drivers won't take them. Too isolated, they say. Too dangerous if something goes wrong. But I've never had a problem. Not in all my years. Changed plenty of tires in 100-degree heat, sure. Dealt with overheated engines and blown hoses. Once had a rattlesnake curl up under my truck while I was checking the cargo straps. But nothing I couldn't handle. My name's Harlan Beck, and this story I'm about to tell you happened in late August of 2019. I was working for a logistics company out of Phoenix at the time, running routes between Arizona and Nevada. Mostly industrial equipment, construction materials, that sort of thing. Nothing exciting, nothing valuable enough to worry about hijackers or thieves. That particular Tuesday, I picked up a load in Tucson around 3 in the afternoon. 42 pallets of HVAC units headed for a warehouse outside of Reno. The manifest said they needed them by Thursday morning, which gave me plenty of time even with the mandatory rest stops. But I wanted to get ahead of schedule, maybe have a day to myself in Reno before heading back. So I planned to drive straight through the night, cutting across some of the emptier stretches of desert highway. The sun was already starting its descent when I merged onto Interstate 10, heading west. I could see it in my side mirror, this massive orange ball sinking toward the horizon, turning the sky into layers of red and purple and gold. Beautiful in a way that makes you feel small. Out here in the desert, you're reminded constantly that you're just a speck, just a tiny dot of metal and flesh crawling across something vast and ancient and completely indifferent to whether you live or die. I had my CB radio tuned to channel 19, the trucker channel, but it was mostly quiet. A few scattered transmissions from other drivers, talking about road conditions and speed traps, but nothing much. The further west I got, the quieter it became. By the time I crossed into Arizona's western territories, I hadn't heard another voice in over an hour. The heat was brutal, even with the AC cranked up. I kept a cooler full of water bottles within reach, going through them faster than I'd anticipated. My shirt was soaked through with sweat, sticking to the seat back. Outside, the desert rippled with heat waves, making the distant mountains shimmer and dance like they weren't quite real. I stopped once around 7 p.m. at a truck stop just past Quartzsite. Grabbed some food, topped off the diesel, used the restroom. The place was nearly empty, just a couple other rigs parked in the lot, and an old man behind the counter who barely looked up when I paid. I remember thinking how dead everything felt, how the whole world seemed to be holding its breath in the heat. Back on the road, I watched the sun finally disappear, leaving behind this twilight that turned everything gray and shadowy. The temperature started to drop, which was a relief, but it also brought this eerie quality to the landscape. All those rock formations and Joshua trees became silhouettes, like paper cutouts against the darkening sky. By the time I crossed into California and merged onto Highway 95 heading north, it was full dark. No moon that night, or if there was one, it was hidden behind clouds. The only light came from my headlights cutting through the blackness, and even those seemed to be swallowed up by the desert. I could barely see 50 feet in front of me. That's when I noticed the first strange thing. My radio, which had been silent for hours, suddenly crackled with static. Not unusual in itself. Radio signals get weird out in the desert, bouncing off rock formations and getting scattered by all that empty space. But this static had a pattern to it, almost like breathing. In and out, in and out, this rhythmic hiss that made the hair on my arms stand up. I reached over and changed the channel, but the static followed me. Every frequency, same thing. That breathing sound underneath the white noise. I told myself it was just interference, maybe from a distant storm or some military installation. The desert's full of places where they test things they don't want the public knowing about. But it bothered me more than it should have. I turned the radio off completely, preferring silence to that unsettling sound. Now, all I could hear was the rumble of my engine, the hiss of air brakes occasionally, the tick-tick-tick of my turn signal when I changed lanes to avoid debris on the road, and underneath it all, a ringing in my ears from the long silence, that high-pitched tone you get when everything's too quiet. Around 11 p.m., I passed through Needles, one of the last towns before entering the real, empty stretches. The place was like a ghost town at that hour, just a few scattered lights and closed businesses. I considered stopping for coffee, but decided against it. I was making good time, and I wanted to get past the worst of the desert before fatigue really set in. Highway 95 curved northwest from there, cutting through some of the most desolate country in the lower 48. During the day, you might see the occasional car or motorcycle, maybe a border patrol vehicle, but at night, especially midweek, this road belonged to nobody. Miles and miles of nothing, with maybe one truck every hour or two heading in the opposite direction. I'd driven this route dozens of times before. I knew every curve, every grade, every place where the road narrowed or the shoulder dropped off sharply. I could practically drive it with my eyes closed, which is a dangerous way to think, but true nonetheless. Familiarity breeds complacency, my old instructor used to say. He was right about that. The thing is, out here in the dark, even familiar roads start to feel alien. The darkness changes everything, makes distances impossible to judge, turns ordinary rocks and cacti into shapes that look almost human in your peripheral vision. Your mind starts playing tricks on you, filling in details that aren't there, seeing movement where there's only stillness. I was about an hour north of Needles when I saw the lights. Just for a second, way out in the desert to my right. Two small points of white light, like headlights but stationary. They were maybe half a mile off the highway, or what looked like half a mile in the dark. Hard to tell distances at night. I slowed down slightly, trying to get another look, but they were gone. Nothing out there but blackness. I figured it was probably another trucker who'd pulled off to sleep, or maybe some campers. People do stupid things in the desert, driving off-road in regular vehicles, getting stuck, running out of gas. Search and rescue pulls out bodies every summer. People who thought they could handle it and found out too late they couldn't. But something about those lights nagged at me. They'd been too far off the road for any vehicle to reach without serious off-road capability, and I hadn't seen any tracks or trails leading that direction. The desert floor out here is hard-packed calichy in some places, soft sand in others, but either way, you'd see evidence of a vehicle passing. I kept driving, trying to shake off the unease that was settling over me. The temperature inside the cab had dropped enough that I turned off the AC and cracked my window instead. The night air that rushed in was cool and dry, carrying with it the scent of creosote and dust, that distinctive smell of the Mojave that I'd grown so familiar with over the years. The highway stretched out ahead of me, a ribbon of gray asphalt marked by faded white lines and the occasional reflector. On either side, the darkness was absolute, broken only by the faint silhouettes of mountains on the horizon. No hares visible tonight, which was unusual. The desert sky is usually so clear you can see the Milky Way like a splash of paint across the heavens. My CB crackled again, making me jump. I'd forgotten I'd turned it off, but apparently I'd only turned down the volume. The speaker hissed and popped, and through the static I could swear I heard something. Not a voice exactly, but something almost like words, too distorted to make out. I reached over and turned it off completely this time, unplugging it from the power socket. Around midnight, I passed mile marker 158. I remember it specifically because there was a small white cross there on the side of the road, one of those roadside memorials people put up for loved ones who died in accidents. This one looked old, weathered by years of sun and wind. Someone had left plastic flowers there once, but they'd faded to colorless husks, barely clinging to the base of the cross. I'd seen that cross dozens of times before. It was a landmark I used to gauge my progress on this route. But tonight, something about it looked different. Maybe it was just the way my headlights hit it, but I could swear the cross was facing a different direction than usual, like someone had moved it, rotated it 90 degrees, so instead of facing the road, it faced out into the desert. I told myself I was wrong, that I was just tired and seeing things wrong. But the image stuck with me, burned into my mind. That white cross, stark against the darkness, pointing toward something out in all that empty space. The road began to climb slightly, following the contours of a low ridge. Up here, the wind was stronger, buffeting the side of my trailer and making me work the wheel to stay centered in my lane. Dust devils danced across the asphalt, caught in my headlights like miniature tornadoes made of sand and darkness. I checked my GPS, still showing me on Highway 95, making good time, about 3 hours from the Nevada border. Everything normal. But the device seemed to be running slowly, the screen refreshing in stutters, my position jumping forward in increments rather than smoothly tracking. I tapped it a couple times, but it didn't help. That's when I noticed my dashboard clock. It read 2:40 a.m. That couldn't be right. I'd passed mile marker 158 at midnight, I was certain of it. And I'd only driven maybe 20 or 30 miles since then, judging by the terrain. But somehow, 2 hours and 40 minutes had passed. I'd lost time somewhere, or the clock was malfunctioning. I grabbed my phone from the cup holder to check the time, but the screen wouldn't turn on. The battery had been at 70% when I last checked it, but now it was completely dead. I plugged it into the charger, but the screen stayed black. A cold feeling spread through my chest, something that had nothing to do with the night air coming through my window. I was totally cut off now. No CB, no phone, no way to call for help if something went wrong. Just me and my truck, alone in the dark. The smart thing would have been to turn around, head back to Needles, get everything checked out, but I was already past the point of no return in my mind. Reno was closer now than going back, and besides, I'd never missed a delivery deadline in 22 years. I wasn't about to start now, so I kept driving, keeping my speed steady at exactly the limit, my hands at 10 and 2 on the wheel, my eyes scanning the road ahead for any obstacles. The wind picked up even more, and I could see dust beginning to blow across the highway, reducing visibility. Not a full sandstorm, not yet, but the precursor to one. That's when I saw it for the first time. Far ahead, barely visible through the blowing dust, a light. Red, like a tail light but steady rather than blinking, just sitting there in the middle of the road, not moving. My first thought was that a vehicle had broken down, but as I got closer the light seemed to recede, staying always at the edge of my vision. I slowed down, confused and increasingly unsettled. The light should have been getting bigger, clearer as I approached. Instead, it maintained the same size, the same intensity, like I wasn't getting any closer to it at all despite the fact that I was definitely moving forward. Then, without warning, it vanished, just blinked out of existence, leaving nothing but empty road ahead. I could feel my heart hammering in my chest, my mouth gone completely dry. I fumbled for one of my water bottles, but my hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped it. "Get it together, Harlan," I told myself. "You're tired, you're seeing things. There's a rational explanation for all of this. The clock malfunction, the dead phone, the light, all just coincidence and fatigue and the weird effects the desert has on electronics." But I didn't believe it, not really. Something was wrong. Something I couldn't explain or rationalize away. And the worst part was I still had hours to go before I reached civilization. The dust was getting thicker now, creating a haze in my headlight beams. Visibility had dropped to maybe 30 feet, forcing me to slow down to 40 miles per hour. The wind howled around the cab, making a sound like voices, like screaming, but I knew it was just air rushing over metal. Had to be. I'd been through sandstorms before, plenty of them. They're a fact of life in desert trucking. You either push through them carefully or you pull over and wait them out, depending on the severity. This one wasn't too bad yet, but it was building. I could feel it in the way the wind came in gusts, each one stronger than the last, rocking the trailer slightly despite its weight. The sky had taken on a weird orange tint, even though it was the middle of the night. The dust reflected what little light there was, creating this sickly glow that made everything look wrong, unnatural. I'd never seen anything quite like it, and I'd driven through storms where the sun disappeared completely, where day turned dark as midnight. Around mile marker 175, I passed an old gas station. I almost missed it in the dust, just caught a glimpse of it off to the right. One of those ancient places from the 50s or 60s, the kind with rounded corners and big plate glass windows, long since abandoned. The pumps were still there, just rusted shells now. The price signs showing numbers that wouldn't buy you a gallon anywhere anymore. Something made me slow down even more as I passed it. The windows were all broken out, and through the empty frames, I could see into the interior. Or I thought I could. The dust made everything hazy and indistinct. But I could swear I saw a light in there, a faint glow, like a lantern or a flashlight. Probably just reflection from my headlights, I thought. Or maybe some homeless person taking shelter. Either way, not my problem. I had a delivery to make, and stopping now would only put me further behind schedule, especially in this dust. But as I accelerated past the station, I glanced in my side mirror and froze. There was someone standing in front of the building, barely visible through the swirling dust. Just a silhouette, but definitely human-shaped, and definitely watching me drive away. Standing perfectly still in the middle of a sandstorm like it was nothing. I jerked my eyes back to the road, my heart racing again. When I looked back at the mirror a second later, the figure was gone. Nothing there but dust and darkness and that abandoned building receding into the distance. My hands were cramping from gripping the wheel so hard. I forced myself to relax, to breathe. This was getting ridiculous. I was letting my imagination run wild, seeing threats where there were none. The fatigue was catching up with me, making me paranoid and jumpy. I needed to focus on the practical concerns. The storm was getting worse, and I had to decide whether to push through or find a place to pull over. The shoulder was barely visible, and I had no idea how stable the ground was off the pavement. Last thing I needed was to get the truck stuck in sand and have to wait for a tow, which could take hours or even days out here. The GPS was still acting strange, the screen flickering and freezing. My position would update, then jump backwards, then forward again, like I was teleporting along the highway. The map display had started showing roads that I knew weren't there, little side routes branching off into the desert where nothing existed but sand and rock. I tried the CB radio again, plugging it back in and turning it on despite my earlier unease. If there were any other trucks nearby, I wanted to know about it. Wanted to hear another human voice. The static came back immediately, that same rhythmic quality I'd noticed before. But now it seemed louder, more insistent. "Any drivers out there on 95?" I called into the mic, my voice sounding strange and hollow in the cab. "This is northbound trucker at mile marker 175, looking for information on weather conditions ahead. Anybody copy?" Nothing but static in response. Not even a fragment of another conversation, which was unusual. The trucker channel is usually active somewhere, even in the dead of night, even in the most remote areas. But tonight, the airwaves were dead except for that steady, breathing static. I was about to give up when a sound came through the speaker that made my blood run cold. A single word, barely audible through the interference, spoken in a voice that didn't sound quite human. "Turn." I stared at the radio, unable to believe what I'd just heard. "Say again?" I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Did someone just transmit?" The static continued unchanged. No response, no clarification, just that endless hiss in and out like breathing. I turned the volume down but left the radio on, not wanting to completely cut myself off from the possibility of human contact. The road had started to decline now, dropping down into a broad valley. Through the dust, I could see the vague shapes of rock formations on either side, tall spires and mesas that looked like sentinels watching over the highway. In daylight, this was actually a pretty scenic stretch, one of the few places where the desert's stark beauty really showed itself. But tonight, those formations looked menacing, their shadows deep and absolute, hiding God knows what. And the valley floor ahead was completely obscured by the dust, making it impossible to see more than a few dozen feet. I was essentially driving blind, relying on my memory of the road and the faint line markings that occasionally appeared in my headlights. That's when I noticed the tracks. Tire tracks, crossing the highway at an angle, heading from the left shoulder to the right. They were fresh, I could tell. The dust hadn't filled them in yet, and the edges were still sharp. Big tracks, too, from a truck similar in size to mine. I slowed down even more, following the tracks with my eyes. They led off the right side of the road and disappeared into the desert. No vehicle in sight, no lights, nothing. Just those tracks, suggesting that another trucker had driven straight off the highway and into the waste. I stopped completely, putting the truck in neutral and setting the brake. This was wrong. Very wrong. No driver in their right mind would leave the pavement in conditions like this, especially not at an angle like that, like they'd suddenly swerved off without warning. And where was the truck now? How far could it have gotten before getting stuck? I grabbed my flashlight from the door pocket, one of those heavy mag lights that doubles as a weapon if you need it to. I wasn't planning on getting out, but I wanted to see if I could spot anything out there, any sign of what had happened. The wind hit me like a physical force when I cracked open the door, full of stinging sand that immediately got in my eyes and mouth. I squinted against it, shining the flashlight in the direction the tracks had gone. The beam barely penetrated the dust, illuminating nothing but swirling particles. I was about to close the door and get back to driving when the light caught something. Just for a second, about 50 yards out, I saw what looked like the back end of a trailer. Dark-colored with no lights, tilted at an odd angle like it was partially sunk into the sand. "Hello?" I shouted, but my voice was immediately swallowed by the wind. I tried again, louder. "Anyone out there? You need help?" No response. The trailer, if that's what it really was, remained dark and still. I stood there in the doorway, torn between my duty to help a fellow trucker and my overwhelming instinct that something was very wrong about this whole situation. The flashlight beam flickered, dimmed, then went out completely. I smacked it against my palm a couple times and it came back on, but weaker than before. Fresh batteries, too. I'd replaced them less than a week ago. No reason for it to be dying already. A gust of wind hit the truck hard enough to rock it on its suspension, and I made my decision. I was getting back in the cab and continuing on. If there really was a truck out there, if someone really needed help, I'd call it in once I got to the next town. But I wasn't going to wander out into a sandstorm in the middle of the night, chasing after something I couldn't even be sure was real. I climbed back in, pulled the door shut, and put the truck in gear. As I started to move forward, I glanced in my side mirror one more time. The beam of my mag light had been pointing in that direction, still shining out through the dust. And in that beam, I saw something move. Not the wind-moving dust, but something solid, something big, crossing from left to right. I floored it, or as close to flooring it as you can in a fully loaded semi. The engine roared, the transmission shifted hard, and the truck lurched forward, leaving whatever I'd seen behind in the dust and darkness. My heart was hammering so hard I could hear it over the engine noise, feel it in my throat. The road climbed again, and the dust began to thin slightly as I gained elevation. I could breathe a little easier, both literally and figuratively. Behind me, the valley was lost in an orange-brown haze, hiding whatever was down there. I checked the dashboard clock, 4:17 a.m., but that couldn't be right either. It had been 2:40 when I first noticed the time discrepancy, and I couldn't have been driving for more than an hour since then. Yet the clock insisted that nearly 2 more hours had passed. Either it was broken, running fast, or I was losing time somehow. The GPS showed me approaching mile marker 190, which meant I'd covered about 15 miles since the gas station. The math didn't add up no matter how I tried to figure it. At my current speed, 15 miles should have taken maybe 20 minutes, not hours. I fumbled with my phone charger again, hoping it had revived, but the screen remained dark, dead as a stone. All my connections to the outside world were severed. No way to call for help, no way to report what I'd seen, no way to verify whether what was happening was real or just exhaustion-induced hallucination. The highway had straightened out now, running arrow straight across a flat expanse of desert. Visibility was better here, maybe 60 or 70 feet, enough to see the next curve coming. I pushed my speed back up to 55, wanting to cover as much ground as possible before the next weird thing happened. Because I was certain now that something would happen. This wasn't just bad luck or equipment failure. This was something else, something I didn't have words for. The desert felt alive around me, watching, waiting, like a predator toying with its prey. The CB crackled again, and this time the voice was clearer, though still distorted. Red mile, red mile, red mile. I grabbed the mic so hard I nearly broke it. "Who is this? What do you want?" No response. Just those 2 words repeated, over and over in that not quite human voice. Red mile, red mile, red mile. I turned the radio off again, hands shaking. Red mile. What the hell did that mean? Some kind of warning? A location? Or just nonsense, random words generated by atmospheric interference? But even as I tried to rationalize it, I knew better. This was targeted, specific. Someone or something was trying to communicate with me, and the message was always the same. Red mile. The road dipped down into a shallow wash, one of those places where flash floods cut across the highway during monsoon season. Metal posts marked the edges, with depth gauges showing how deep the water could get. I'd driven through here dozens of times, knew exactly where it was, how long it took to cross. But as I descended into the wash, something was different. The road surface changed, became rougher, like I was driving on gravel instead of asphalt. And the color was wrong. Instead of gray-black, it looked reddish in my headlights like rust or dried blood. The red mile, I thought, and my stomach dropped. The wash was maybe 100 yards across, but it felt like miles. The rough surface made the truck shake and rattle, and I could hear loose items in the cab bouncing around. The color seemed to intensify as I drove, becoming brighter, more vivid, until it was almost glowing in my headlights. Then I was out, back on normal pavement, the color returning to gray. I looked in my mirrors, but the wash behind me looked completely normal, just dark asphalt like always. Had I imagined the red surface? Was my mind playing tricks on me, making me see things that weren't there? But my truck's clock now read 4:19 a.m. I'd crossed that 100-yard wash in 2 minutes, according to the dashboard. That was impossible. At 55 miles per hour, it should have taken maybe 3 or 4 seconds. But 2 minutes had passed. I was losing time, chunks of it, disappearing without explanation. And every time it happened, I felt like something was shifting, like reality was coming loose at the seams, allowing things to slip through that shouldn't be there. The dust had almost completely cleared now, and I could see the stars finally, thousands of them scattered across the black sky. I took some comfort in that, in the normalcy of it. Stars don't change. They don't play tricks. They're just burning balls of gas billions of miles away, indifferent to human concerns. But even that comfort was short-lived. Because, as I watched, one of the stars moved. Not drifted the way satellites do, but jerked, like a light switch being flipped on and off in rapid succession. And then another one did the same thing, and another. I forced myself to look away, to focus on the road. The stars aren't moving, I told myself. It's just your eyes. Just fatigue making you see motion where there is none. Keep driving. Keep focused. You're almost to Nevada, almost to civilization. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was wrong, that something fundamental had changed. The desert around me didn't feel empty anymore. It felt full, crowded with invisible presences, watching eyes, things that had no names. The CB crackled one more time, and through the static, I heard something that made me want to cry. Breathing. Not the rhythmic static from before, but actual human breathing, ragged and desperate, like someone running. And underneath it, faint but unmistakable, the sound of footsteps. Running footsteps, getting closer. I didn't turn the radio off this time. I needed to know, needed to hear what came next. The footsteps grew louder, faster, and then suddenly stopped. A moment of silence, just the hiss of static, and then a voice, clear as day. It's still following me. That's all. No explanation, no context. Just those 4 words, spoken in a tone of absolute terror. And then the static returned, loud and overwhelming, drowning out everything else. I don't know how long I drove after that. Time had become meaningless, the dashboard clock jumping forward in irregular increments that bore no relation to my actual movement. Sometimes I'd look down and only a minute had passed. Other times I'd glance away for what felt like seconds and find that 10 or 15 minutes were gone. The landscape around me had changed too, though I couldn't say exactly how. The rock formations seemed different, arranged in patterns I didn't recognize. The road still ran straight and true, but the mile markers weren't appearing where they should. I'd gone from marker 190 to 195 to 203, skipping numbers, sometimes going backwards. The GPS had given up entirely, showing nothing but a blank screen with a blinking cursor. Around what the clock claimed was 5:45 a.m., though the sky showed no sign of approaching dawn, I entered what I can only describe as a dead zone. Everything became muffled, distant, like I was underwater. The engine noise faded to a dull rumble. The wind stopped completely. Even my own breathing sounded far away, like it was coming from someone else's lungs. The dust returned in full force, but this time it didn't blow or swirl. It just hung in the air, perfectly still, creating a wall of gray-brown that my headlights couldn't penetrate. I was forced to slow to a crawl, maybe 10 miles per hour, feeling my way forward more than actually seeing the road. That's when the lights started appearing. Not headlights, not taillights, but small points of light off in the desert, scattered at irregular intervals. Sometimes on the left side of the road, sometimes on the right, sometimes both. They'd appear for a few seconds, then wink out, only to reappear somewhere else. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds, like a field of fireflies in the darkness. I tried to focus on just one, to track it and figure out what it was, but my eyes couldn't hold on to them. They'd be there in my peripheral vision, bright and clear, but the moment I looked directly at them, they'd vanish or shift position. It was maddening, disorienting, making me dizzy and nauseated. The CB had been silent for a while, but now it came alive again with a sound that wasn't static, wasn't a voice, wasn't anything I could identify. It was rhythmic, pulsing, almost musical, but in a way that hurt to listen to. I reached for the volume knob to turn it down, but my hand froze halfway there. Because, through the dust ahead, I could see something massive. A shape, darker than the surrounding darkness. Tall and irregular like a rock formation, but wrong somehow. It was blocking the road, or seemed to be, though the dust made it impossible to judge distance or size accurately. I slowed even more, nearly stopping. Every instinct screamed at me to turn around, to flee, but I couldn't. Behind me was only that strange valley and whatever had been moving in the dust. Ahead was, I didn't know what, but at least it was forward. At least it was progress. As I crept closer, the shape resolved itself into something that made my rational mind rebel against what my eyes were showing me. It was a truck. Or it had been a truck once. Now it was something else entirely, twisted and warped like it had been through a trash compactor but was still somehow upright, still sitting across both lanes of the highway. The cab was folded in on itself. The windshield shattered inward, the hood bent upward at a 90-degree angle. The trailer was accordion pleated, compressed to maybe half its normal length. But there was no debris field, no skid marks, nothing to indicate a collision or accident. It was just sitting there, impossibly damaged, like it had been plucked up by a giant hand and squeezed. I stopped completely about 50 feet away, putting the truck in park but leaving the engine running. I didn't want to get out, didn't want to get any closer, but I also couldn't just leave without checking if there was a driver inside who needed help. Even if they couldn't possibly be alive, I had to know. I grabbed my mag light, checked to make sure it was working. It was, surprisingly, and opened the door. The silence outside was absolute. No wind, no engine noise except my own, no desert sounds at all. Just perfect, dead silence that pressed against my eardrums like physical weight. The dust was so thick I could taste it, gritty and metallic on my tongue. It clung to my skin, got in my eyes, made breathing difficult. I pulled my shirt up over my nose and mouth, using it as a makeshift filter, and started walking toward the wreck. With every step, I expected something to happen. For the wreck to suddenly move, or for something to emerge from the darkness, or for the dust to clear and reveal that there was nothing there at all. But none of that happened. The wreck remained still and silent, waiting. I could see now that it was similar in size and shape to my own rig, a long-haul freight truck, though I couldn't make out any company markings through the dust and damage. The paint job looked dark, maybe blue or black, but it was hard to tell. As I approached the cab, my flashlight beam swept across the driver's side door. The window was blown out, leaving just jagged teeth of glass around the frame. I shined the light inside, steeling myself for what I might see. Empty. The cab was completely empty. No driver, no blood, no signs of struggle or injury. Just an empty seat with the stuffing coming out in places, and a steering wheel twisted into a spiral like taffy. The dashboard was shattered, the instruments all dark. And hanging from the rearview mirror was an air freshener, one of those tree-shaped ones, still gently swaying despite the complete absence of wind. I reached through the broken window and grabbed it, pulled it out to look at it more closely. It was brand new, I could tell. The scent was still strong, pine, artificial and chemical. No dust on it at all, unlike everything else. Someone had put this here recently, within hours, maybe, and then they'd disappeared, leaving behind only this crushed wreck. I backed away from the truck, a cold horror spreading through me that had nothing to do with the temperature. This was wrong on every level. Physics doesn't work like this. Trucks don't get compressed like aluminum cans without external force. Drivers don't vanish into thin air. That's when I heard it. A sound from behind me, from the direction of my own truck. A metallic creak, like a door opening. I spun around, bringing the flashlight up, but I couldn't see my rig through the dust. It was only 50 feet away, but it might as well have been miles. "Hello?" I called out, my voice sounding weak and pathetic in the silence. "Is someone there?" The creaking continued, rhythmic now, like a door swinging on rusty hinges. Back and forth, and underneath it, something else. Footsteps. Or something that sounded like footsteps but wasn't quite right. The rhythm too slow, the weight too heavy. I started walking back toward my truck, faster now, trying not to panic but feeling it rising in my throat like bile. The flashlight beam bounced and jerked with my movements, creating crazy shadows in the dust. Everything looked the same in every direction, featureless gray-brown that could hide anything. The creaking stopped suddenly, replaced by complete silence again. I froze, listening, trying to pinpoint where the sound had been coming from. But there was nothing. Just that oppressive quiet that seemed to muffle even my thoughts. My truck materialized out of the dust without warning, appearing so suddenly I almost walked into it. The driver's door was closed, though I was certain I'd left it open. The engine was still running. I could feel the vibrations through the ground, but something was off. The sound was different, deeper, like it was running slower than it should be. I climbed back into the cab, slammed the door, and locked it. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely grip the steering wheel. I had to get out of here, had to get past that wreck and continue on, no matter what was waiting up ahead. I put the truck in gear and started moving forward, steering around the wreck on the shoulder. The truck rocked and bounced on the uneven ground, and I held my breath, praying I wouldn't get stuck or blow a tire. The wreck passed by my window, close enough that I could have reached out and touched it, and I kept my eyes fixed straight ahead, refusing to look at it. Then I was past it, back on the pavement, accelerating. I didn't look in the mirrors, didn't want to see if the wreck was still there or if it had somehow moved. I just drove, faster and faster, pushing the truck up to 70 despite the poor visibility. The dust began to thin again, gradually, until I could see maybe 100 feet ahead. The road climbed steadily, gaining elevation, and I could feel the temperature dropping. My breath started to fog slightly, which was odd given that it was supposedly late August. The CB crackled, and a voice came through, clear and calm and horrifyingly matter-of-fact. "You shouldn't have stopped." I grabbed the mic, shouting into it, "Who is this? What's happening?" "Red Mile," the voice replied. "You're in the red mile. Time doesn't work right here. Distance doesn't work right. You're going to keep driving, and you're never going to reach the end." "That's impossible," I said. But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't true. I'd already seen too much, experienced too much that shouldn't be possible. Where's the driver from that truck? What happened to them? Static answered me at first. Then, still driving, still looking for a way out. Same as you'll be, same as all of us. The transmission cut off, leaving me with only the white noise. I looked down at my odometer, trying to calculate how far I'd come, but the numbers made no sense. They'd gone up, then down, then stayed the same for a while, then jumped forward by 50 miles all at once. There was no rational explanation for any of it. The GPS screen suddenly flickered to life, showing a map, but it wasn't any map I recognized. The road I was on branched and looped and doubled back on itself in impossible ways, like an Escher drawing. My position marker was moving along one of these loops, going in circles, never making forward progress even though I was definitely moving forward. I thought about the driver from the crushed truck. Still driving, the voice had said. Still looking for a way out. How long had they been in here? Days? Weeks? Years? And how many others were there, trapped in this nightmare stretch of highway that didn't follow normal rules? The highway crested a ridge, and suddenly the dust was gone completely, and I could see the valley ahead. But it wasn't the valley that should be there. It was too wide, too deep, and the far side was impossible to gauge. It could have been miles away or mere yards. The perspective was all wrong. And scattered across the valley floor were lights. Hundreds of them, thousands maybe. All stationary, all pointing upward like searchlights or beacons. And among those lights I could see vehicles. Trucks, mostly. But also cars and motorcycles and RVs, all parked at random angles, all with their lights on. Some of them were clearly damaged. Others looked perfectly normal, but all of them were empty, as far as I could tell from this distance. I pulled over to the side of the road, or what I thought was the side. It was hard to tell where the pavement ended and the desert began anymore, and just sat there, staring at this impossible scene. This wasn't real. Couldn't be real. But I was seeing it, experiencing it, and that meant something, even if I couldn't understand what. The CB came alive again, and this time there were multiple voices all talking at once, overlapping and arguing and pleading. Been here for 3 days. My family doesn't know. Road just keeps looping back. Can't find. Something following me in the dust. I can hear it breathing. Red mile. They call it the red mile. Once you're in, you can't. I turned the volume up, desperate to hear more, to understand what was happening. But the voices faded as quickly as they'd appeared, replaced by that same rhythmic static, that breathing sound I'd heard at the beginning. My dashboard clock read 2:40 a.m., the same time it had shown hours ago, when I'd first noticed something was wrong. I'd been driving in circles, maybe, or time had simply reset. Either way, I was back where I'd started, at least temporarily, if not physically. I tried to restart my phone one more time, but it remained dead. All my navigation apps, my emergency contacts, my way of calling for help, all of it useless. I was completely isolated out here, cut off from everything familiar and safe. The lights in the valley began to flicker, not all at once, but in waves, rippling across the desert floor like a living thing. And in the spaces between the lights I could see movement, shapes too distant to identify, passing between the vehicles. Sometimes humanoid, sometimes not. Sometimes solid, sometimes translucent. All of them searching, wandering, lost. I realized with growing horror that those weren't shadows or tricks of the light. Those were the drivers, the people who'd stopped, who'd gotten out of their vehicles to investigate or look for help, and had become part of this place. They were still here, still trapped, still searching for a way out that might not exist. I put the truck back in gear, hands steady now despite the fear coursing through me. I wasn't stopping again, wasn't getting out. Whatever happened, I was staying in my cab, staying mobile, refusing to become one of those wandering shapes down in the valley. The road descended toward the valley floor, and as it did, the lights grew brighter, more intense, until they were almost painful to look at. I could see details on the abandoned vehicles now. Open doors, shattered windows, cargoes spilled across the ground. Some of them had been there for years, judging by the rust and decay. Others looked brand new, and standing among them, perfectly still, was a figure. Just one, directly in my path. I couldn't make out any features, just a dark silhouette against the lights. It didn't move as I approached, didn't react to my headlights at all, just stood there, waiting. I should have swerved, should have gone around, but something compelled me to keep going straight, to see what would happen when I reached it. The figure grew larger in my windshield, and I could see now that it was wearing what looked like old-style trucking gear. Denim coveralls, work boots, a cap with some company logo I didn't recognize. At the last possible second, I yanked the wheel to the right, missing the figure by inches. As I passed it, I made the mistake of looking in my side mirror. The figure was turning, tracking my movement, and in the red glow of my taillights I caught a glimpse of its face. It had no features, not burned away or covered or hidden, just absent. A smooth expanse of skin where eyes and nose and mouth should have been, and yet I could feel it watching me, could sense its awareness following my truck. I accelerated hard, weaving between the abandoned vehicles, trying to find a clear path through this graveyard of lost travelers. The road had disappeared entirely. Either it had never extended this far into the valley, or the sand had covered it over time. I was driving on instinct now, following what looked like a path but could have been anything. More figures appeared, standing among the vehicles or walking slowly between them, all of them faceless, all of them aware of my presence. They turned as I passed, their featureless heads tracking my movement with unsettling precision. The CB was a constant roar of voices now, screaming and crying and laughing and whispering all at once. I couldn't make out individual words anymore, just this overwhelming wall of sound that expressed every emotion simultaneously. I reached for the power button to turn it off, but before I could, one voice cut through all the others, clear and commanding. Keep driving. Don't stop. Whatever you do, don't stop. And then, with a pop and a hiss, the CB died completely, smoke rising from the unit. The smell of burning electronics filled the cab, acrid and sharp. I was on my own now, truly alone. No radio, no phone, no GPS, just me and my truck and this impossible desert that had swallowed me whole. I don't know when I realized I was never going to leave. Maybe it was when the sun didn't rise at 6 a.m. or 7 or 8. Maybe it was when I saw my own truck in the distance parked among the others, its lights on, me visible through the windshield staring back at myself. Maybe it was when I noticed the dust starting to fall upward instead of down, rising from the desert floor like ash from a fire in reverse. The road appeared again eventually, cutting through the valley like someone had just laid it down fresh. I followed it because there was nothing else to do, even though I knew it wouldn't lead anywhere I wanted to go. The mile markers had given up any pretense of sequence. I passed marker 200, then 47, then 893, then 200 again. I saw more drivers as I went. Some of them tried to flag me down, standing in the road waving their arms. I drove through them without slowing. They weren't solid. My truck passed through them like they were made of mist. Others just watched from beside their abandoned rigs, those smooth blank faces turning to follow my progress. Somewhere around what the clock insisted was 9:30 a.m., though the sky remained the same dark purple-orange it had been for hours, I saw the crushed truck again. The same one, definitely. I recognized the air freshener hanging from the mirror, still swinging gently, but it was in a different location now, on the opposite side of the road, facing the wrong direction. I drove past it without stopping, without even slowing down. The landscape began to repeat. I'd see the same rock formation, the same Joshua tree, the same curve in the road, over and over. Not similar, identical. Like reality was stuttering, skipping, playing the same scene on loop. Each time I passed the same landmarks, there were more abandoned vehicles. More faceless figures standing watch. My fuel gauge read full. It had been near half when I started this journey, and I'd been driving for what felt like 8 or 10 hours, but the needle sat firmly at the top. When I looked at the odometer, it was running backwards, the numbers decreasing as I drove forward. I stopped checking the gauges after that. Stopped looking at the clock. Stopped trying to figure out where I was or how far I'd come. None of it mattered. The numbers meant nothing here. The dust came back in waves, sometimes thick enough that I was driving blind, sometimes clearing just enough to see the next stretch of horror. During one clear period, I saw what looked like a rest stop ahead. Actual buildings, lights on, signs promising food and fuel and lodging. I almost cried with relief. But as I got closer, I could see that the buildings were wrong. The proportions were off, the angles too sharp or too shallow, the windows reflecting things that weren't there. The gas pumps were 10 feet tall. The doors opened onto nothing but more darkness. The neon signs advertised services in languages I didn't recognize, using symbols that hurt to look at. I kept driving. Something changed around what the clock claimed was 2:40 a.m. again. The air pressure shifted, making my ears pop. The color of the dust went from orange-brown to deep red, the color of rust or old blood, and in the distance I could hear something. Not voices or wind or engines, but a sound like grinding, like massive gears turning deep underground. The faceless figures began to move more purposefully now. Not just watching, but converging, following roads I couldn't see toward some central point ahead. I watched them in my mirrors, dozens of them, then hundreds, all walking in the same direction I was driving. A migration of the lost. I crested another rise and saw the source of that grinding sound. In the center of the valley, where all those abandoned vehicles had been clustered, something was emerging from the desert floor. Something huge and dark and made of angles that shouldn't exist in three-dimensional space. It rose slowly, shedding sand and dust, and those lights I'd seen earlier weren't lights at all. They were windows, or openings, and things moved behind them. The faceless figures walked toward it without hesitation, disappearing into those openings one by one. And I understood, suddenly and completely, that this was where they went. Where everyone ended up, eventually, if they stayed too long in the Red Mile. This was the destination, the final stop, the place where lost travelers went to be. I don't have words for what they went to be. I yanked the wheel hard left, leaving the road, driving directly away from that thing. My truck bounced and shuddered over the rough terrain, but I didn't care. I couldn't go there. Wouldn't go there. Death would be preferable. The grinding sound grew louder, angrier, like whatever that thing was didn't appreciate me fleeing. The dust turned from red to black, thick as oil, coating my windshield until I couldn't see anything at all. I kept driving anyway, steering by instinct, by feel, by desperation. And then, with a lurch that threw me forward against my seatbelt, everything changed. The dust was gone. The grinding sound was gone. The impossible structure was gone. I was on a normal highway, 2 lanes of gray asphalt marked with standard white lines, running through ordinary desert under an ordinary sky. The sun was just starting to rise, painting the eastern horizon pink and gold. My phone chirped from the cup holder. I grabbed it, hands shaking, and saw that it had turned on, showing full battery and a signal. The clock read 6:47 a.m. My GPS showed me on Highway 95, approximately 40 miles south of the Nevada border, exactly where I should be based on my original route plan. Everything was normal. Everything was fine, like nothing had happened at all. I pulled over immediately, stopping on the shoulder, and just sat there. My hands were still shaking. My shirt was soaked with cold sweat. My heart was hammering against my ribs. But according to every device in my truck, I'd just spent a normal night driving a normal route through normal desert. I checked my logbook, the paper one I kept for backup. The last entry was from when I'd left Tucson at 3 p.m. the previous day. No other entries. No record of stopping, no notes about what I'd experienced. Just blank pages. The fuel gauge read exactly where it should, given the distance I'd traveled. The odometer showed the correct mileage. Even my coffee cup in the cup holder was still half full and still warm, like I'd just poured it minutes ago instead of hours. I picked up my CB mic and called out, voice hoarse, "Any trucks out there? This is northbound on 95. Anyone copy?" Immediately, responses came back. Normal voices, normal conversations, drivers talking about weather and road conditions, and truck stops. Everything perfectly, reassuringly mundane. But I noticed something as I sat there. On the pavement ahead of me, barely visible in the early morning light, there was a patch of discoloration. A reddish stain, maybe 10 feet across, right there in my lane. It could have been anything, oil, rust, dirt, but it was red, very red. I pulled back onto the highway and drove through it, and for just a second, just a fraction of a second, I felt that same pressure change, heard that same grinding sound, saw the dust starting to form. Then I was through, and everything was normal again. I completed my delivery in Reno on time, handed off the cargo, got my paperwork signed, found a motel and slept for 14 hours straight. When I woke up, I tried to convince myself it had all been a fatigue-induced hallucination, that I'd just pushed too hard and my brain had rebelled with an extraordinarily vivid nightmare. But I know better, because I still drive that route 3 or 4 times a month. I have to. It's my job, my livelihood. And every single time around mile marker 175, when the sun has set and the darkness is complete, I see that patch of red on the pavement ahead. Sometimes it's in the same place. Sometimes it moves. But it's always there, waiting. And each time I drive through it, I feel that pressure change. I hear the faint echo of that grinding sound. The dust starts to gather at the edges of my headlight beams, and my dashboard clock, just for a moment, reads 2:40 a.m. I never stop anymore. Never slow down. I keep my CB turned off, my phone charged, my fuel tank full. I drive through that patch of red as fast as I safely can. And I don't look in my mirrors because I don't want to see what might be standing there on the shoulder, watching with a smooth and featureless face. The red mile is still there. I know it is. It's waiting, patient as the desert itself. For the moment when I hesitate, when I stop, when I make the same mistake I made that night. And sometimes in those brief seconds when I pass through that red patch, I hear the CB crackle to life even though it's turned off. I hear that voice, calm and matter of fact, saying the same thing it always says. Still driving. I've never been one for superstition. My daddy raised me practical, taught me that there's a rational explanation for everything if you look hard enough. Ghosts are just wind and old houses settling. UFOs are weather balloons and satellites. Strange noises in the desert are coyotes and your own imagination running wild because you've been alone too long. But I'll tell you something. After 18 years of hauling freight across the American Southwest, I've learned that being practical only gets you so far. Some things don't have rational explanations, and the desert keeps those secrets better than anywhere else. My name is Warren Collier, and I drive for a mid-sized logistics company based out of El Paso, Texas. Nothing fancy, nothing glamorous. We move machine parts, industrial equipment, construction materials. The kind of cargo that keeps the world running but nobody thinks twice about. I like it that way. Steady work, decent pay, and most importantly, I get to spend my days alone with my thoughts and the open road. This all started in early September of 2018. I'd picked up a load in Albuquerque, headed for a distribution center outside of Bakersfield, California. Standard route, one I'd driven probably 50 times before. Take I-40 west to Needles, then cut north on Highway 95 through the Mojave. Long haul, about 16 hours total with breaks, but nothing I couldn't handle. I left Albuquerque around noon on a Thursday, which meant I'd be crossing the worst of the desert during the night. That was fine by me. Nighttime desert driving is actually preferable in my opinion. Cooler temperatures, less traffic, and you can make better time without worrying about the highway patrol sitting behind every overpass. The first leg went smooth as silk. Made good time across New Mexico and into Arizona, stopped once for fuel and a sandwich around 6 p.m. The sun was setting as I pulled back onto the interstate, painting the desert in those shades of orange and purple that people pay good money to see in paintings, but we get for free out here. I had my radio tuned to a country station out of Flagstaff, volume low, just background noise to keep the silence from getting too heavy. My CB was on channel 19 like always, quiet, except for the occasional trucker checking in with weather updates or asking about road conditions ahead. Everything normal, everything routine. By the time I crossed into California around 9 p.m., full dark had settled in. The kind of darkness you only get in the desert, where there's no light pollution for miles in any direction. Just my headlights cutting through the black, the white lines on the road, and the stars overhead so bright and thick they almost looked fake. I just passed through Needles when I noticed the first thing that seemed off. My GPS, I run one of those truck-specific units that shows rest stops, way stations, low bridges, all that, started acting strange. The screen would flicker, then freeze for a few seconds, then jump forward showing me half a mile further down the road than I actually was. I tapped it a couple times, figured it was just a glitch. The unit was a few years old, starting to show its age. But then it happened again, and again. Each time the screen would freeze, and when it came back, I'd have mysteriously covered more distance than should have been possible. I checked my odometer against the mile markers, and the numbers matched what the GPS was showing. But something about it felt wrong, like I was losing little chunks of time without noticing. I shook it off, probably just tired, probably not paying as close attention as I thought. I'd been on the road for 9 hours at that point, and the monotony of desert driving has a way of making your mind wander. Around 10:30, I merged onto Highway 95 heading north. This is where the desert really opens up, where civilization becomes a distant memory and you're just a tiny speck moving through vast emptiness. The highway here is well maintained but narrow. 2 lanes with minimal shoulder, winding between rock formations and across dry lake beds that shimmer white in the headlights. Traffic was almost non-existent. I'd see maybe one car every 20 or 30 minutes, passing in the opposite direction. Headlights appearing as distant stars that grew brighter and then swept past in a wash of sound and wind, and then disappeared into the darkness behind me. No other trucks, which was unusual but not unheard of for a Thursday night. I was maybe 40 miles north of Needles when I saw the sign. It came up on my right, lit by my headlights for just a moment. A standard green highway sign with white lettering that read, Exit 46, Gas Food Lodging, 1 mile. I almost missed it. Would have, if I hadn't been thinking about needing to stop soon for coffee. My thermos was empty, and I could feel that heaviness starting to creep into my eyelids. That dangerous drowsiness that comes on sudden and can put you in a ditch before you realize what's happening. Exit 46. I pulled out my atlas, yeah, I still carry one, old habits die hard, and flipped to the California section, tracing my finger along Highway 95. According to the map, there was no Exit 46. The exits went from 39 to 51, with nothing in between. Just long stretches of empty desert with occasional scenic turnouts. But I'd definitely seen the sign. And besides, the GPS was showing an exit coming up, labeled Rest Area, Services Available. Maybe the atlas was outdated. They build new exits all the time, especially in areas where development is starting to creep into the desert. The mile passed quickly. I watched my odometer tick over, and right on cue, the exit ramp appeared on my right. No sign this time, but the ramp was clearly visible, the pavement only slightly more faded than the main highway. It curved off into the darkness, and at the end I could see lights. Actual electric lights, the yellow-white glow of sodium vapor lamps. I put on my turn signal, force of habit, even though there was nobody around to see it, and took the exit. The ramp was steep, dropping down below the level of the main highway, which was strange. Usually, exits in flat desert terrain are at grade level or even slightly elevated. But this one descended, curving around a rocky outcrop that blocked my view of what lay ahead. As I came around the curve, I saw it, a truck stop. Small, nothing fancy, but clearly operational. There was a gas station with 4 pumps under a weather-beaten canopy, a small convenience store with its lights on, and what looked like a diner or restaurant attached to the side. A couple of parking spots for trucks, currently empty. The whole place looked like it had been there for decades, the kind of mom-and-pop operation that used to be common along these routes before the big chains took over. I pulled into the truck parking area and stopped, leaving the engine running while I looked around. Something felt off about the place, though I couldn't put my finger on what exactly. Everything looked normal enough. The lights were on, the pumps looked functional. There was even a neon "open" sign flickering in the convenience store window. But there were no other vehicles. No cars at the pumps, no trucks in the lot, no lights visible in what might have been living quarters above the store. The place looked operational but abandoned, like everyone had just stepped away for a moment and would be back any second. I considered just leaving, getting back on the highway and finding coffee somewhere else. But the next services I knew about were at least 50 miles north, and I really did need that coffee. Besides, maybe I'd just arrived during a slow period. Places like this, stuck out in the middle of nowhere, probably went hours without seeing a customer. I shut off the engine and climbed down from the cab. The silence hit me immediately. No wind, no animal sounds, no distant traffic noise. Just perfect, absolute quiet that pressed against my eardrums like water. The air was cool, but not cold, carrying that distinctive desert smell of dust and creosote, and something else I couldn't quite identify. Something slightly chemical, almost like ozone. The lights from the station buzzed faintly, that electric hum that fluorescent tubes make, but even that seemed muffled somehow. My footsteps on the concrete sounded too loud, echoing slightly in ways they shouldn't in an open space. I walked toward the convenience store, my hand instinctively checking that my wallet was in my back pocket. The door was one of those glass jobs with a metal frame and a bell that jingles when you open it. I pushed it open and stepped inside. The bell didn't jingle. It just hung there, silent. the mechanism apparently broken or disconnected. The interior was larger than it had looked from outside, stretching back into shadows that the overhead lights didn't quite reach. The shelves were fully stocked: chips, candy, beef jerky, all the usual truck stop fare. There was a coffee station along the back wall, with 3 pots sitting on warmers. The little lights were on, showing that the coffee was ready. But there was no one behind the counter. No clerk, no manager, nobody. "Hello," I called out, my voice sounding strange and flat in the empty store. "Anyone here?" No response. I waited a moment, then walked toward the counter. There was a bell there, the kind you tap for service, and I hit it once. The ding seemed to go on forever, fading slowly into that heavy silence. Still no response. I looked around more carefully now, noticing details I'd missed at first. The magazines in the rack by the door. They looked current, showed recent dates. The prices on the shelves matched modern numbers, not old ones from decades ago. The credit card machine at the counter was new, one of those chip readers. This place was operational, or at least had been very recently. But where was everyone? I walked down one of the aisles, my boots squeaking slightly on the linoleum floor. The fluorescent lights overhead flickered occasionally, and I noticed that some of them were buzzing louder than others, creating this irregular rhythm that was somehow more unsettling than silence. At the end of the aisle, I found a door marked "Employees Only." It was slightly ajar, and through the gap I could see darkness beyond. Not the darkness of an unlit room, but something deeper, more absolute. It made my skin crawl just looking at it. I backed away from the door and turned around, heading for the coffee station instead. Whatever was or wasn't behind that door, it wasn't my business. I just needed coffee, and then I'd get back on the road. The coffee pots were full, steam rising from the liquid inside. I grabbed a large cup and filled it. Black. No sugar. The coffee smelled fresh, looked fresh, and when I took a cautious sip, it tasted perfect. Hot, but not scalding. Strong, but not bitter. I carried the cup back to the counter, planning to leave some money and go. There was no way to ring up the purchase without a clerk, but I wasn't about to steal. I pulled out my wallet and extracted a $10 bill, way more than enough for a cup of coffee, and set it on the counter. That's when I noticed the logbook. It was sitting beside the register, one of those composition notebooks with a black and white speckled cover, the kind truckers used to keep before everything went digital. Curious, I flipped it open. The pages were filled with entries handwritten in different styles, different inks. Names, dates, times, brief notes. I scanned through them, going backwards through the pages. Marcus Trent, Septi 2, 2018, 11:45 p.m., fuel and coffee, no one here. J. Davidson, Septi 1, 2018, 2:30 a.m., pumped gas, left money on counter, place empty. Sarah Chen, August 30, 2018, 1:15 a.m., where is everyone? The entries went back weeks, all with the same theme. Truckers stopping at this place, finding it empty, leaving notes about it. Some left money, some didn't bother. All of them commented on the absence of staff. I flipped further back, and the dates jumped. August 15th, then July 3rd, then June 11th. The entries were getting sparser the further back I went, and the handwriting was changing too, becoming older looking, the ink fading. Robert Hayes, May 8, 2017, 3:00 a.m. Second time here? Still no one, still works. L. Morrison, March 22nd, 2016, midnight. Thought I saw someone through the back window, but when I looked again, they were gone. Tommy Wu, December 17th, 2015, 4:45 a.m. This place shouldn't exist, not on any map. But here it is. I kept flipping, faster now, my heart rate picking up. The dates jumped further and further back, 2014, 2012, 2009. The handwriting styles changed. The ink color shifted from black to blue to pencil. The paper itself started looking older, yellowed and brittle. Dale Kemp, October 3, 2005, found this place by accident. GPS shows nothing here. Monsieur Rodriguez, June 28, 2001, third visit. Coffee is always fresh. How? Charles Webster, April 14, 1997. Highway Department says no exit here, but I'm standing in it. My hands were shaking now. I flipped to the very beginning of the logbook, the first entry ever made. William Cross, August 16, 1983. New exit, new station. Grand opening tomorrow. Looking forward to serving the trucking community for years to come. But that couldn't be right. The notebook looked old, sure, but not 35 years old. And besides, all the supplies in the store were current. The magazines were from 2018. The credit card reader was brand new. I closed the logbook carefully and set it back where I'd found it. My coffee cup felt heavy in my hand, the liquid inside still steaming, still fresh. I looked around the store again, seeing it with new eyes now. Everything was too perfect, too clean, too well stocked, too maintained. There was no dust on the shelves, no scuff marks on the floor, no worn patches where customers would typically stand. The place looked brand new despite supposedly having been here for 35 years. And yet, the logbook entries were real, written in real ink by real hands. Hundreds of truckers over decades, all finding this place empty, all leaving notes and moving on. I walked to the door and looked out at my truck sitting in the parking lot. It looked normal, solid, real, but something about the angle of the shadows seemed wrong, like the lights were coming from a direction that didn't match where the lamps actually were. I pulled out my phone to check the time and maybe take some pictures as proof I'd been here. The screen lit up showing 11:47 p.m., which seemed about right. But when I opened the camera app, the screen went black. Not crashed, not frozen, just black, like the lens was covered even though it wasn't. I tried a few more times with the same result. Finally, gave up and put the phone back in my pocket. Whatever was going on here, it apparently didn't want to be photographed. The rational part of my brain was screaming at me to leave, to get back in my truck and return to the highway and forget this place existed. But another part, the part that had driven trucks for 18 years and thought I'd seen everything the road had to offer, wanted answers, wanted to understand what this place was and why it was here. I walked back to the counter and grabbed a pen from the cup beside the register. I flipped the logbook to the last entry and added my own. Warren Collier, Sept 6, 2018, 11:47 p.m. Place is empty, but everything works. Left $10 for coffee. I set the pen down and read over what I'd written. It looked just like all the other entries, matter of fact, almost mundane. Just another trucker stopping at a mysterious place that shouldn't exist. I left the $10 bill on the counter and headed for the door, coffee in hand. As I reached for the handle, I heard something that made me freeze. Footsteps. Coming from the back of the store, from behind that employees-only door. Slow footsteps, deliberate, getting closer. I didn't wait to see who or what was making them. I pushed through the door and practically ran to my truck, coffee sloshing out of the cup and burning my hand. I climbed into the cab, locked the doors, and started the engine with shaking hands. Through the convenience store windows, I could see movement inside. Just shadows. Nothing distinct, but definitely movement. Something was in there now, something that hadn't been there moments before. I threw the truck into gear and started pulling out, not even bothering to check my mirrors. I just wanted to get back to the highway, back to normal reality where things made sense. As I swung around to face the exit ramp, my headlights swept across the gas pumps. And that's when I saw it. Fresh tire tracks in the dust around the pumps. Big tracks, from a heavy vehicle. Still wet looking, like they'd been made in the last few minutes. But I was the only vehicle here. There were no other trucks, no cars, nothing. So where had those tracks come from? I didn't stick around to figure it out. I accelerated up the exit ramp, climbing back towards the main highway. My hands were still shaking and I could feel my heart hammering against my ribs. The coffee sat in my cup holder, forgotten now, though I could still smell it. Fresh, strong, normal. The ramp curved back around that rocky outcrop, and then I was back on Highway 95, the solid white line appearing in my headlights, the familiar road stretching north into darkness. I merged on and accelerated, putting as much distance between me and that exit as I could. After about 10 miles, I finally let myself relax slightly. I glanced in my rearview mirror, but there was nothing behind me except darkness. The exit was long gone, swallowed by the desert and the night. I picked up the coffee cup, intending to take a drink and steady my nerves, but my hand stopped halfway to my mouth. The cup was full, completely full, right to the brim, with no sign of the coffee I'd spilled when running to the truck. The liquid inside was still steaming, still fresh, like I'd just poured it. I set the cup back down very carefully and kept driving, my eyes fixed on the road ahead, refusing to look at it again. I made it another 30 miles before I had to pull over. Not because I wanted to, but because my hands were shaking so badly I couldn't trust myself to keep the truck straight. I found a scenic turnout with a bathroom and a couple of picnic tables, a normal, well-marked, definitely on the map rest area, and pulled in. There were 2 other vehicles there, a minivan with Colorado plates and a sedan with California tags. Real people, real vehicles. The sight of them made me feel marginally better, like I'd returned to normal reality. I grabbed my phone and tried to pull up Google Maps, wanting to see if exit 46 appeared on any digital maps. But I had no signal. Not unusual out here in the deep desert, but frustrating. I'd have to wait until I got further north to search for information. The coffee cup sat in my cup holder, still full, still steaming. I'd been driving for half an hour, and it should have cooled down by now, should have at least stopped steaming, but it looked exactly as it had when I'd first poured it. I reached out and touched the side of the cup carefully. It was hot, but not burning hot. Normal coffee temperature. I picked it up, swirled it slightly, and watched the liquid move in perfectly normal ways. It looked, smelled, and felt like regular coffee. I brought it to my lips and took a small sip. It tasted perfect. Exactly as good as that first sip back at the station. Rich, smooth, strong, without being bitter. The best cup of truck stop coffee I'd ever had, if I was being honest. I set it back down and stared at it, trying to figure out what was happening. The rational explanations I could think of didn't hold up. Spilled coffee doesn't magically refill itself. Hot coffee doesn't stay hot indefinitely. And yet here it was, defying basic physics right in front of me. Maybe I'd imagined spilling it. Maybe, in my panic, my memory had invented details that didn't happen. That was possible, right? The mind does strange things under stress. But I could remember it clearly. The coffee sloshing out as I ran. The burning sensation on my hand. The dark stain on my jeans where it had splashed. I looked down at my jeans now. No stain, not even a wet spot. Clean and dry like I'd just put them on. I got out of the truck and walked over to the restrooms, needing to splash some water on my face and take a minute to think. The building was standard Bureau of Land Management construction. Cinder block walls, steel door, single fluorescent light above the entrance. Perfectly normal. Perfectly mundane. The water from the sink was cold and tasted slightly mineral, typical of desert well water. I splashed it on my face, used the facilities, and walked back outside. The other vehicles were still there, and through the minivan's windows I could see kids asleep in car seats, a woman dozing in the passenger seat. Normal people on a normal road trip. I checked my watch, 12:31 a.m. I'd been on the road for about 12.5 hours, which was about right given when I'd left Albuquerque and accounting for my stop in Arizona. No missing time, no gaps in memory, everything adding up the way it should. Except for exit 46. Except for that impossible truck stop with its logbook full of entries spanning 35 years. Except for the coffee that wouldn't cool down and wouldn't stay spilled. I walked around my truck, checking the tires and cargo straps out of habit. Everything looked good. The truck was solid and real, 53 feet of steel and rubber and diesel fuel, obeying all the normal laws of physics. I climbed back into the cab and pulled out my atlas again, studying the section of Highway 95 I'd just driven. The map showed nothing between exits 39 and 51, just as I'd thought. According to this atlas, published in 2017, exit 46 didn't exist. But I'd seen it. I'd taken it. I'd walked around that truck stop, touched its counters, drank its coffee. It was real, at least in some sense of the word. I grabbed my CB mic and keyed it, speaking into channel 19. This is northbound on 95. Anyone out there familiar with exit 46? The one with the truck stop? Looking for information, over. Static hissed back at me for a moment. Then a voice came through, sounding distant and slightly distorted. Exit 46? There's no exit 46 on 95, driver. You sure you got the right highway? Positive, I replied. I saw a sign for it about 40 miles south of my current position. Took the exit, there's a whole station there. Gas pumps, convenience store, the works. Silence for a few seconds, then, been driving this route for 20 years, friend. Never seen any exit 46. You sure you didn't dream it? Night driving can play tricks on your mind. Another voice chimed in before I could respond. Hold on, exit 46? I've heard stories about that place. From other drivers back in the day. Supposed to be some kind of ghost station or something. Shows up sometimes, then disappears. You didn't stop there, did you? My chest tightened. Yeah, I stopped. Got coffee. Why? Jesus, man. The second voice sounded worried now. The stories say bad things happen to people who stop there. They get turned around, lose time, see things that aren't there. One guy told me he stopped at that exit, and when he got back on the highway, he'd somehow jumped 50 miles north without remembering driving it. That's CB legend bullshit, the first voice cut in. Ghost stations, come on. This ain't some horror movie. Driver probably just missed his exit or misread a sign. I know what I saw, I said, my voice firmer than I felt. It was there. It was real. And the coffee, I stopped, realizing how crazy I was about to sound. The coffee, what? The second voice asked. I looked at the cup sitting in my holder, still steaming faintly. Nothing, never mind. Thanks for the information. I hung up the mic before they could respond. My hand was shaking again. Bad things happen to people who stop there. Lost time, seeing things that aren't there. Great, just great. I needed to get back on the road, needed to keep moving. Sitting here dwelling on this wasn't going to help. I'd finish the haul, deliver the cargo, and then maybe do some research when I had time and internet access. There had to be a rational explanation, there always was. I pulled back onto Highway 95 and continued north. The road stretched out in my headlights, white lines and dark asphalt, exactly as it should be. The mile markers appeared at regular intervals, counting upward in proper sequence. Everything normal, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. The desert looked the same but felt different, like I was driving through a slightly altered version of reality. The shadows seemed deeper, the stars too bright, the silence too complete. Around 1:15 a.m. I passed a semi coming the other direction. The standard trucker greeting, a brief flash of the headlights. But as the other truck passed, I could swear the driver was staring at me. His face pressed close to the side window, eyes wide like he'd seen something shocking. I checked my mirrors, but the truck disappeared into the darkness behind me without slowing down. The temperature was dropping. I could see my breath fogging slightly in the cab despite the heater running. Outside, the thermometer on my side mirror read 52 degrees, which was reasonable for a September night in the desert. But it felt colder somehow, like the cold was coming from inside me rather than the outside air. My phone suddenly buzzed, making me jump. I grabbed it from the cup holder, when had I put it there, and saw a text notification. But there was no sender name, and no message content. Just a blank text from no number. I deleted it and set the phone down, but it buzzed again immediately. Another blank text from nowhere. I turned the phone off completely and put it in the glove compartment. Whatever was happening, I didn't need the distraction. I had to stay focused on driving, on getting to Bakersfield and completing this haul. The CB crackled to life even though I hadn't heard anyone key up. Exit 46, exit 46, services available. 1 mile. I grabbed the mic. Who is this? How are you broadcasting on my radio? No response. Just static and then that voice again. Exit 46, exit 46, services available. 1 mile. I looked ahead but saw no exit sign, no ramp, nothing but endless highway. The GPS screen was dark, turned off even though I hadn't touched it. I reached over to turn it back on, and it flickered to life, showing. I squinted at the screen, confused. According to the GPS, I was approaching exit 46. It showed up clearly on the map display, marked with icons for gas, food, and lodging. The distance counter ticked down. 0.8 miles, 0.7 miles, 0.6 miles. No, I said aloud. No, I'm not doing this again. I'm not stopping. But even as I said it, I could see lights ahead on the right side of the road. Sodium vapor lights, 4 of them, arranged in a square pattern exactly like they'd be above gas pumps. And beneath them, that same weathered canopy, that same small convenience store. Exit 46. It was back. Or I was back. Or I'd never left in the first place. I kept my foot on the accelerator, determined to drive past it. I didn't need more coffee. I didn't need gas. I didn't need anything that place might offer. I was going to pass it and keep going and forget it existed. But as I approached, my truck started to slow down. Not because I was braking, my foot was still firmly on the accelerator, but like something was resisting, holding me back. The engine RPM stayed constant, but my speed dropped from 70 to 60 to 50 to 40. Come on, I muttered, pressing harder on the accelerator. Come on, don't do this. The exit ramp appeared in my headlights, and my steering wheel began to turn, gently but firmly, angling the truck toward the ramp. I fought it, gripping the wheel with both hands and trying to straighten out. But it was like fighting against power steering that had a mind of its own. The wheel kept turning, smooth and inexorable, guiding the truck toward the exit. No, I shouted, pulling hard to the left. I'm not stopping. For a moment, I thought I'd won. The truck straightened out, the exit starting to pass by on my right. But then the wheel jerked hard, almost pulling itself out of my hands, and the truck swerved sharply onto the ramp. I slammed on the brakes, but they didn't respond. The pedal went to the floor without resistance, and the truck kept rolling, coasting down the ramp at a steady 20 miles per hour. All my controls had stopped working. Accelerator, brakes, steering, everything. The truck was driving itself. The ramp curved around that rocky outcrop, and there was the truck stop again, exactly as I'd left it. Or exactly as I'd seen it the first time. Lights on, open sign flickering, no other vehicles in the lot. My truck rolled to a stop in the same parking spot I'd used before, and then the engine shut itself off. I sat there in the sudden silence, my heart pounding, my hands still gripping the useless steering wheel. The clock on my dashboard read 2:40 a.m., but that couldn't be right. It had been 1:15 a.m. when I'd passed that other truck. I couldn't have lost more than an hour. I tried to restart the engine. The key turned, but nothing happened. No starter motor, no dashboard lights, nothing. The truck was completely dead. Through the windshield, I could see the convenience store. The lights were on, the coffee station visible through the windows, and standing behind the counter, clearly visible, was a figure. Not detailed enough to make out features, just a human-shaped silhouette, standing perfectly still, facing in my direction. I watched it for a long time, and it never moved. Just stood there, watching me watch it. Finally, I made a decision. I couldn't sit in the truck forever. My phone was dead, my CB wasn't working, and I had no way to call for help. If I wanted to get out of this situation, I was going to have to go inside and confront whatever was waiting for me. I unlocked the door and climbed down from the cab. The silence pressed against me, heavy and expectant. My boots crunched on the concrete, each step echoing slightly in ways that didn't quite make sense. As I approached the store, the figure behind the counter remained motionless. I could see it more clearly now through the glass, definitely human-shaped, wearing what looked like a uniform shirt and cap. A clerk, maybe, or something pretending to be a clerk. I reached the door and paused with my hand on the handle. Every instinct I had was screaming at me not to go in, to run, to find another way. But there was no other way. The highway was a quarter-mile back up that ramp, and my truck wasn't starting. I was stuck here until I figured out what this place wanted from me. I pulled the door open and stepped inside. The bell above the door stayed silent, just like before. The interior looked identical to my previous visit. Same fully stocked shelves, same coffee station, same flickering fluorescent lights. The only difference was the figure behind the counter. Except, now that I was inside, I couldn't see it anymore. The space behind the counter was empty, just like before. But I'd seen someone there through the window. I was sure of it. "Hello," I called out. My voice sounded flat and dead in the space. "Is anyone here?" No response. I walked toward the counter, my eyes scanning the store for any sign of movement. The logbook was still there beside the register, still open to the page where I'd written my entry. But there was a new entry below mine, written in handwriting I didn't recognize. Warren Collier, Sept. 7, 2018. 2:45 a.m. You came back. I stared at the entry, my blood running cold. The date was wrong. It was still September 6th, wasn't it? I'd only left a couple of hours ago. And the handwriting, it looked old somehow. The ink slightly faded, like it had been written years ago rather than minutes. And the message itself, you came back, like it had known I would, like this had been expected, planned for. I flipped through the logbook, looking at other entries. And that's when I noticed something that made my stomach drop. Every few pages, scattered throughout the decades of entries, I found the same name appearing over and over. Warren Collier, July 12, 2015, 3:20 a.m. Warren Collier, March 8, 2012, 1:45 a.m. Warren Collier, November 23, 2008, 4:10 a.m. Warren Collier. August 7, 2003, 2:30 a.m. Going back and back, dozens of entries with my name, dates I'd never been here, times I couldn't remember. Some of the entries had brief notes. Tried to leave, came back. This is the third time. I don't remember the first visit. The coffee never gets cold. I slammed the logbook shut, my hands shaking violently now. This wasn't possible. I'd never been here before tonight. I'd never seen this place until a few hours ago. Those entries had to be fake, had to be someone's idea of a sick joke. But the handwriting varied. Different pens, different inks, different styles. Some entries looked decades old. They couldn't all be faked. Could they? I backed away from the counter, looking around the store with new fear. What was this place? Some kind of trap? Some kind of loop? Was I stuck here, doomed to return over and over, writing entries in that logbook that I'd never remember making? The lights flickered, and in that moment of darkness, I saw something. Just for an instant. In the reflection of the store windows, I saw the parking lot outside. But it wasn't empty anymore. It was full of trucks. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds, packed in so tightly they touched, all different makes and models and years, stretching off into the distance further than the lot should extend. The lights came back on, and the reflection showed only my lone truck sitting in the empty lot. I ran for the door, no longer caring about understanding what was happening, only wanting to get out. But as I reached for the handle, a voice spoke behind me. Not from any specific direction, but from everywhere at once, from the air itself. The exit will always be here. You'll always find it, no matter how hard you try not to. This is where you belong now. I yanked the door open and ran outside, sprinting for my truck. Behind me, I could hear footsteps, dozens of them, hundreds maybe, all moving in unison, following me. But when I looked back, there was nothing there except the store, its lights flickering erratically now. I climbed into the cab and tried the key again. This time, mercifully, the engine turned over. I threw the truck into gear and accelerated toward the exit ramp, not caring if I blew the engine or jackknifed the trailer. I just needed to get back to the highway, back to normal reality. The ramp climbed back up to Highway 95, and as I crested the top, something changed. The air pressure shifted, my ears popped, and suddenly everything felt normal again. My headlights were bright, cutting through ordinary darkness. The road stretched out properly ahead of me. Even the stars looked right. I merged onto the highway and pushed my speed up to 75, putting distance between me and that cursed exit. My dashboard clock read 3:02 a.m., which meant I'd lost almost 2 hours. Again. I didn't look back, didn't check my mirrors, just drove, hands locked on the wheel, eyes fixed forward. The coffee cup sat in my cup holder, still full, still steaming. I drove for 3 hours straight without stopping, watching the sky gradually lighten from black to deep blue to pale orange. Sunrise in the desert is usually beautiful, something I normally enjoy, but today it just felt like a reprieve, like I'd survived something that hunted in darkness. By the time I crossed into Nevada around 6 a.m., I was exhausted. Not just physically tired, but mentally drained. That deep fatigue that comes from sustained fear and confusion. Every muscle ached from gripping the steering wheel too hard for too long. My jaw hurt from clenching my teeth. I needed rest, needed to stop somewhere public and safe and normal, but the thought of pulling off the highway terrified me now. What if the next exit I took led me right back to that truck stop? What if exit 46 could appear anywhere, anytime, just waiting for me to make the mistake of stopping? Around 7 a.m., I finally worked up the nerve to pull into a large travel plaza on I-95 outside of Las Vegas. It was a big commercial operation, part of a national chain, with dozens of gas pumps and multiple restaurants. More importantly, it was crowded. I counted at least 20 trucks in the lot and twice that many cars. Real people, real vehicles, real normal morning activity. I parked and just sat for a minute, watching people come and go. A family with young kids headed into the McDonald's. A businessman in a suit pumped gas into his sedan. A couple of truckers stood by their rigs, smoking and talking. Everything beautifully, wonderfully mundane. The coffee cup was still in my cup holder. Still full, still steaming, even though the sun was fully up now and heating the cab. I'd been driving with it for over 7 hours, and it hadn't cooled down at all, hadn't evaporated, hadn't changed in any way. I grabbed it carefully and opened my door, intending to dump it out. But when I tilted the cup, nothing came out. The liquid stayed level, defying gravity, steam still rising from its surface. I tilted it further, almost upside down, and still the coffee remained in the cup, perfectly level, like it was painted on. "What the hell?" I whispered, staring at the impossible sight. A voice from beside me made me jump. "You okay there, buddy?" I looked down to see an older trucker standing by my truck, looking up at me with concern. He was maybe 60, weathered face and gray beard, wearing a cat diesel cap and a jacket with his company logo. "Yeah," I said, trying to sound normal. "Yeah, just tired, long night." He glanced at the coffee cup in my hand, which was now right side up again, the liquid settling back to its normal position. "Rough run?" "You could say that." I climbed down from the cab, setting the coffee cup on the step. "You ever heard of Exit 46 on Highway 95? The one with the truck stop?" His expression changed immediately. The friendly concern vanished, replaced by something that looked like fear mixed with pity. "Where'd you hear about that?" "I didn't hear about it. I was there, twice. Last night." I watched his face, trying to gauge his reaction. "You know about it. I can see it in your eyes." He looked around, making sure no one else was close enough to hear. Then he stepped closer and lowered his voice. "Don't talk about that place, especially not here. You want people thinking you're crazy." "I'm starting to think I am crazy," I admitted. "Tell me what you know, please." He was quiet for a long moment, studying my face. Then he sighed. "You got time for breakfast? This isn't a conversation to have standing in a parking lot." 20 minutes later, we were sitting in a booth at the truck stop diner, coffee and eggs in front of us. The old trucker's name was Frank Briggs, and he'd been driving for 35 years. The same 35 years that Logbook had been collecting entries. "I saw it once," Frank said, quietly, picking at his hash browns. "Back in Nor, I think it was. Late night run, same as you, same stretch of highway. Saw the sign, thought I'd grab some coffee. Pulled in, and the place was empty. Lights on, everything working, but no people. Did you go inside?" I asked. He nodded. Grabbed coffee, left some money on the counter. Didn't think much of it at the time. Figured maybe it was one of those honor system places or the clerk was in the bathroom. Got back in my truck and left. And I couldn't find it again. Drove that route dozens of times after that. Looked for that exit every single time. Never saw it. Started to think I'd dreamed the whole thing. He took a sip of his coffee, grimacing slightly. Then, about 10 years ago, I'm at a truck stop in Arizona, and I overhear two guys talking about this mysterious exit on 95. Same story. Empty truck stop, fresh coffee, nobody around. That's when I knew I hadn't imagined it. Did they say anything else about what happens if you stop there more than once? Frank's expression darkened. One of them said he'd been back, said he didn't mean to, said he tried to avoid it, but one night he just found himself taking that exit again, and when he went inside, he found a logbook with his name in it from his first visit. But there were other entries too, with his name, from dates he didn't remember. My stomach clenched. What happened to him? Don't know. Never saw him again after that conversation. But here's the thing. Frank leaned forward, his voice dropping even lower. I asked around after that, quiet-like, talking to drivers I trusted. Found 4 other guys who'd been to that exit. All of them had the same story. Empty place, fresh coffee, logbook full of entries. And all of them said the same thing. Once you've been there once, you'll go back. Might be weeks, might be years, but eventually that exit will appear again, and something will make you take it. That's insane, I said. Exits don't appear and disappear. Places don't work like that. You're right, they don't. But that place does. He pushed his plate away, appetite apparently gone. My theory, it's not really there, not physically anyway. It's something else. Something that exists in the gaps. Between places, between times. And once it's marked you, once you've stopped there, you're connected to it somehow. Connected how? Hell if I know. I'm a truck driver, not a physicist or a paranormal investigator. But I'll tell you what one old-timer told me, back when I first started asking around. He said the truck stop is collecting something. Every driver who stops there leaves something behind, even if they don't realize it. And the more you go back, the more it takes. I thought about that logbook, about all those entries stretching back decades. Hundreds of drivers, maybe thousands, all stopping at that impossible place. All leaving, what, time, memories, something less tangible. The coffee, I said suddenly. The coffee stays fresh forever. Doesn't cool down, doesn't evaporate. I've had the same cup since last night and it's like it was just poured. Frank's eyes widened. You took something from there? You took the coffee with you? Yeah, why? Is that bad? Jesus Christ. He ran a hand over his face, looking genuinely scared now. That's worse than just stopping there. That's taking something that belongs to that place. You've tied yourself to it even stronger now. How do I get rid of it? I asked, panic rising in my chest. I don't know. Nobody ever mentioned taking anything from there. Everyone just got coffee or gas and left. He stood up, pulling out his wallet and throwing some bills on the table. Listen, I gotta get going. I've got a schedule to keep, but you need to figure out how to break that connection, and fast. Because if what I've heard is true, the more times you go back, the harder it is to leave. Wait, I grabbed his arm. What do you mean, harder to leave? I left twice. I got back on the highway both times. Frank looked at me with something like pity in his eyes. Did you? Or did it let you leave? Think about it. That place has been operating for at least 35 years, probably longer. If it couldn't let people leave, someone would have noticed. Trucks don't just disappear without questions being asked. Families would report missing drivers. The authorities would investigate. So, what are you saying? I'm saying it lets most people leave. Lets them come back again and again, taking a little more each time. But eventually... He trailed off, not finishing the thought. Eventually what? I demanded. Eventually, you don't leave. Eventually, you become part of the collection. He pulled his arm free from my grip. Good luck, Warren. I hope I'm wrong about all this. He walked away, leaving me sitting in that diner booth with cold eggs and a head full of nightmare scenarios. I looked out the window at my truck sitting in the parking lot, that coffee cup visible on the step where I'd left it, steam still rising in the morning sunlight. I needed to get rid of it, needed to break whatever connection it represented. But how? Just dumping it out clearly didn't work. I'd tried that and the liquid refused to leave the cup. Throw the whole thing away? Would that be enough? Or would the cup just reappear in my truck somehow? I paid for breakfast and walked back outside. The travel plaza was even busier now, the morning rush of truckers and commuters in full swing. I made my way to my truck and picked up the coffee cup, examining it closely. It looked like a standard paper cup with a plastic lid, the kind you'd get at any truck stop or gas station. But the coffee inside moved wrong, too thick, too viscous. And that steam. I walked over to a trash can and removed the lid. The coffee inside was dark, almost black, and when I sniffed it, there was no smell at all. Just nothing. Like the liquid had no scent whatsoever, which was wrong. Coffee always has a smell. I tilted the cup over the trash can and watched as the liquid slowly, finally, began to pour out. It moved like syrup, thick and heavy, taking far too long to empty. And when it hit the trash inside, it didn't splash or spread. It just sat there, a dark puddle, perfectly round, not soaking into the paper or mixing with the other garbage. I threw the empty cup in after it and walked away quickly, wiping my hands on my jeans even though I hadn't actually touched the liquid. My hands felt dirty anyway, contaminated, like I'd been handling something unclean. Back in my truck, I checked my phone. It had turned itself back on somehow, and when I looked at my messages, I saw dozens of blank texts from no number, all received throughout the night. I deleted them and opened my GPS app, intending to plot the rest of my route to Bakersfield. The app showed my current location at the travel plaza, which was correct. But it also showed something else, a marked location about 40 miles south, back the way I'd come. When I zoomed in, I could see what it was labeled, Exit 46, Visited 2X. I closed the app and reopened it, but the marker remained. I tried deleting it, but there was no option to remove it. It just sat there on the map, a permanent reminder of where I'd been. I was about to close the phone when it buzzed with a notification. A calendar reminder. Visit Exit 46. Tonight, 2:40 a.m. I hadn't created that reminder. I never created reminders. But there it was, scheduled for tonight, like an appointment I couldn't miss. I deleted it, but immediately another one appeared. Visit Exit 46, tomorrow, 2:40 a.m. I deleted that one too. Another appeared. Visit Exit 46, next week, 2:40 a.m. I kept deleting them, and they kept reappearing, dates and times scrolling forward into the future. Days, weeks, months, years. All of them scheduled for 2:40 a.m., the same time my dashboard clock had shown each time I'd been to that place. Finally, I just turned the phone off again and threw it into the glove compartment. I couldn't deal with this right now. I had a delivery to make, a schedule to keep. I'd worry about Exit 46 and its implications later, after I'd completed this haul and had time to think clearly. I started the truck. It fired right up, no problems, and pulled out of the travel plaza. The highway stretched north toward Bakersfield, familiar and normal and safe. I just had to keep driving, keep moving forward, and everything would be fine. But as I merged onto I-95, I noticed something in my side mirror that made my blood run cold. There, in the far distance, barely visible against the horizon, was a sign. Green, with white lettering, too far away to read clearly, but I knew what it said. Exit 46, services available, 1 mile. But I was miles away from where that exit should be. I'd driven north for hours, put over 100 miles between me and that stretch of Highway 95. The exit couldn't be here. It was impossible. I looked ahead through the windshield and saw it. The exit ramp curving off to the right, exactly where it shouldn't be. The same rocky outcrop, the same angle, the same distance from the highway. Exit 46 had followed me. My hands started shaking again, But I forced myself to stay calm. I didn't have to take the exit. I could just drive past it, ignore it, keep going. It couldn't force me off the highway, not in broad daylight with other vehicles around. But as I approached, something strange happened. The other vehicles on the highway, the cars and trucks that had been visible moments before, were gone. Not gradually, not fading into the distance, but just gone. Like someone had flipped a switch and removed them from reality. I was alone on the highway. Completely alone. And my truck was slowing down again, the same way it had before, speed dropping even though my foot was on the accelerator. The steering wheel began to turn, guiding me toward the exit. "No," I said, gripping the wheel tighter. "Not again. You're not doing this again." But the wheel kept turning, smooth and inexorable, and my truck rolled onto the exit ramp like it was following a script. Down the ramp, around the rocky outcrop, and there was the truck stop again. Exactly as it had been. Except this time there were other vehicles in the lot. Trucks, mostly, a dozen or so, parked at various angles, and standing beside them, watching my approach, were figures. Human-shaped, wearing trucker clothes, but their faces. Their faces were blurred somehow, like I was looking at them through frosted glass. My truck rolled to a stop in the center of the parking lot and the engine shut off. Through my windows I could see the figures slowly approaching, walking in unison, forming a circle around my truck. The dashboard clock read 2:40 a.m. even though the sun was shining bright overhead. And from the CB radio, even though it was turned off, even though I'd unplugged it, I heard a voice. "Welcome home, Warren. We've been waiting for you." I don't remember getting out of the truck. One moment I was sitting in the cab, watching those blurred figures surrounding me, and the next I was standing in the parking lot with my hand on the door handle of the convenience store. The sun was still shining overhead, but the light looked wrong, like it was coming through dirty glass. The shadows fell in directions that didn't match the sun's position. The figures were still there, standing in a circle around my truck, but they were clearer now. I could see their faces, and the sight made something in my chest clench. They weren't strangers. I recognized some of them from the CB radio conversations I'd had over the years, from brief encounters at truck stops, from passing waves on lonely highways. Fellow truckers, some I'd known by name, others just familiar faces. But they were wrong somehow. Their expressions were too neutral, too blank. Their eyes tracked me but didn't seem to see. They just stood there, silent and still, like mannequins arranged in a parking lot. I pushed open the door to the convenience store. The bell still didn't ring, and went inside. The logbook was on the counter, open to a page near the end. I walked over and looked at the most recent entry. Warren Collier, Sept. 7, 2018, 2:40 a.m., final visit. Below it, in the same handwriting, was a note that made my knees weak. "Thank you for your service. Your route has been reassigned. Please proceed to the back room for processing." The back room, that door marked "Employees Only" that I'd seen on my first visit. It was open now, not just cracked but fully ajar, and the darkness beyond seemed less absolute. I could see light in there, a faint orange glow, and movement. Shadows moving against shadows. I should have run. Should have tried to get back in my truck and force it to start, drive through those standing figures if necessary, romb the barrier at the exit if that's what it took. But I didn't. Something compelled me forward, toward that open door, like a fish being reeled in by an unseen line. The back room was larger than it should have been. Larger than the entire store, actually. The space extended back into impossible distances, the ceiling rising to heights I couldn't see. And along the walls, stretching away in both directions, were shelves, not stocked with merchandise but with cups, coffee cups, thousands of them, tens of thousands, maybe more, each one sitting on a shelf with a small placard beneath it. I walked to the nearest shelf and looked at the placard. Michael Henderson, 1983-1997, 14 years of service. The cup above it was full of coffee, steam rising gently. I moved to the next one. Ruth Martinez, 1991-2008, 17 years of service. Another full cup, still steaming. I walked down the aisle, reading placard after placard. Names I didn't recognize, dates that spanned decades. Every one of them had a cup of fresh, steaming coffee sitting above their name. Every one of them labeled with years of service. Near the end of one aisle, I found Frank Briggs' cup. The placard read, Frank Briggs, 1984, present. 35 years of service. He'd told me he'd only been there once, that he'd never been back. But his cup was here, full and steaming, and the placard said he was still actively serving. I kept walking, drawn deeper into that impossible room, and eventually I found what I was looking for. An empty shelf near the back, with a fresh placard already in place. Warren Collier, 2003-2018, 15 years of service. 15 years. But I'd only started driving in 2000, and I'd only been to this place twice in the last 24 hours. The math didn't work out. Unless... I pulled out my wallet and looked at my driver's license. The photo showed a younger version of me, and the issue date was 2003. 15 years ago. But I remembered getting it renewed in 2017, just last year. I remembered the DMV, the long line, the surly clerk who'd barely looked at me. But the license in my hand said 2003. And when I looked at the photo more closely, I realized it was slightly different than I remembered. The angle was wrong, the expression not quite right. Like it was a picture of someone who looked like me but wasn't quite me. I checked my phone. It had turned itself on again, and opened my photo gallery. The most recent photos were from 2003, me standing beside my truck, younger than I remembered being. Me at a truck stop somewhere, grinning at the camera. Me sleeping in my cab during a rest break. But I didn't remember taking any of these photos. I didn't remember being that young, looking that happy, having that much hair. I scrolled back further and the photos jumped. 2003, 2012, 2015. No photos in between, just gaps of years where I apparently didn't take a single picture. And in each one, I looked exactly the same age. Not aging, not changing, just frozen at maybe 45 years old. The truth settled over me like a cold blanket. I hadn't been to this place twice in the last day. I'd been coming here for 15 years, making regular stops, leaving parts of myself behind each time. The entries in that logbook with my name stretching back to 2003, those were real. I'd made them. I just couldn't remember because that's what this place does. It takes your time, your memories, yourself, and replaces them with false ones, filling in the gaps so you never notice what's missing. Those calendar reminders on my phone, scheduling visits at 2:40 a.m., I'd been keeping those appointments. For 15 years, like clockwork, I'd been stopping at exit 46. And each time, I'd left a little more of myself behind. I walked back to the front of the store, my legs moving automatically, and found my cup already sitting on the counter next to the register. It was identical to all the others. Paper cup with plastic lid, steam rising gently, coffee that would never get cold or evaporate or obey any natural law. The blurred figures from outside were in the store now, standing in the aisles, watching me with those not quite seeing eyes. I recognized more of them now. That guy I'd shared breakfast with in Flagstaff back in 2007. The woman who'd helped me change a tire outside of Phoenix in 2010. The old man who'd warned me about a speed trap on Highway 40 in 2014. All of them were here. All of them serving their time in Exit 46's eternal collection. I picked up my cup, and the moment I touched it, I understood. This wasn't just coffee. It was me. 15 years of memories, of time, of experiences, all distilled and compressed into this cup of liquid that would never cool, never change, never end. I carried it toward the back room, toward my shelf, and as I walked, I started to forget. Forget my family, my home, the reasons I'd started driving trucks in the first place. Forget the feel of real sunshine on my skin, the taste of food that actually had flavor, the sound of music that wasn't filtered through a truck's speakers. All of it fading, being drawn into the cup, replaced by an eternal present where I was always driving, always heading toward Exit 46, always arriving at 2:40 a.m. no matter what time the sun said it was. I placed my cup on my shelf, perfectly centered, and watched as the steam rose and curled in patterns that almost looked like words, like messages, like screams trapped in vapor. Behind me, I could hear the door closing, not slamming, just clicking softly shut, the sound of finality. I turned to look, but the door was already gone, the wall smooth and unbroken where it had been. I was in the collection now, part of the inventory. My route had been reassigned. The other figures came and stood beside me, silent and still, and I understood that this was how it would be forever. Standing in this impossible room, watching new drivers arrive, watching them take their coffee and leave, and return and leave and return until eventually they joined us here on these shelves. Time passed, or didn't pass. Hours, or days, or years. There was no way to tell anymore, no clock that mattered, no schedule to keep. Just the eternal moment of Exit 46, where the coffee is always fresh, and the lights are always on, and the logbook keeps collecting names. Sometimes I think I can remember my old life. Flashes of it anyway. A woman's face, maybe a wife. A house that might have been mine. A dog that used to run out to meet my truck when I'd come home from a haul. But the memories fade as quickly as they come, drawn back into that cup on my shelf. Steam rising forever. New cups appear on the shelves sometimes. New names added to the collection. I watch them place their cups with the same blank understanding I'd felt, the same resignation. We don't talk to each other. I don't think we can anymore. We just stand and watch and serve our time. The strangest part is that I'm still driving. Not physically. My body is here, standing in this room, becoming part of the walls somehow. But some version of me is still out there on the highways. I can feel it, like having a limb you can't see. Still making runs, still hauling freight, still stopping at regular truck stops and talking to other drivers and keeping my logbook up to date. But that version will find Exit 46 again. At 2:40 a.m., no matter where he is, no matter how carefully he plans his routes. He'll see the sign and take the ramp and walk into this store and add another entry to the logbook. And each time, a little more of what's left will be drawn into the cup, concentrated into that impossible liquid that defies physics and reason. There's a map on one wall of the back room. I notice it now. A map showing highways across the American Southwest, and scattered across it are markers. Hundreds of them. Thousands, maybe. Each one labeled Exit 46 with a different highway number, a different mile marker. The exit doesn't exist in just one place. It exists everywhere and nowhere, appearing wherever it needs to appear to collect its next driver. A trap laid across the entire desert, patient and permanent. I want to warn the drivers who haven't found it yet. Want to tell them to avoid it, to never take an exit they don't recognize, to always check their maps twice and trust their instincts. But I can't. I'm part of the collection now, and the collection doesn't warn people away. It welcomes them in. My truck is still out there somewhere, the version of me that's still driving, still behind the wheel. Maybe he's in Bakersfield right now, delivering that load of HVAC equipment, accepting his payment, planning his next route. Not knowing that he's already given 15 years to exit 46, not remembering any of it, just living in the false timeline the exit created for him. He'll drive that route again. Tomorrow, or next week, or next month. And at 2:40 a.m. he'll see the sign. He always does. And each time he stops, the cup on my shelf gets a little fuller, the steam rises a little higher, and another memory gets distilled into liquid that never cools, never changes, never ends. The logbook in the front room is always open now when I check it, always showing my entry from 2003, from my first visit that I don't remember. Sometimes I walk out there and read through it, looking at all the names, all the dates, all the brief notes drivers left before they understood what this place was. And sometimes, very rarely, I see new entries appear even though nobody is in the store. Names and dates and timestamps, writing themselves in invisible hands. Warren Collier, Sept. 14, 2018, 2:40 a.m. Warren Collier, Sept. 21, 2018, 2:40 a.m. Warren Collier, Sept. 28, 2018, 2:40 a.m. On and on, regular as clockwork. Marking visits I won't remember making, time I'm still giving, even though I'm already here, already collected. The exit will never let me go, not completely. Some part of me will keep driving those desert highways forever, keep finding exit 46 at 2:40 a.m., keep stopping for coffee that tastes perfect and never gets cold. And years from now, decades, maybe centuries, when my cup has finally collected every last drop of what I was, when there's nothing left to take, I'll fade completely into these walls, join the structure itself, become part of the trap for the next driver, the next collection. I can see them in the walls now when I look closely, faces pressed against the painted cinder blocks, mouths open in silent words, eyes that track movement but can't quite focus, drivers who came before me, who gave their time until there was nothing left to give, who became the foundation on which exit 46 is built. I'll be one of them eventually. A face in the wall, forever watching as new drivers pull into the parking lot, as they walk through the door, as they write their names in the logbook and don't understand what they're signing away. The coffee in my cup continues to steam, rising in patterns that spell out secrets I used to know, roads I'll never drive again, places I'll never see, a life I can barely remember having. Sometimes I stand at the window and look out at the parking lot, at the trucks coming and going, at the blurred figures that used to be people. And I think about that version of me still out there driving, still hauling freight across the Southwest, still thinking he's living a normal life. He doesn't know he's already here, already collected, already serving his time in exit 46's eternal inventory. But he'll understand eventually, the next time he stops, or the time after that, or the time after that, at 2:40 a.m., at exit 46, where the coffee is always fresh. The thing about driving the same route for 12 years is that you stop seeing it. Your eyes register the road, your hands make the turns, your foot finds the brake when it needs to, but your mind is somewhere else entirely. Autopilot, they call it. Dangerous as hell, but every long-haul trucker does it. You have to, or the boredom will eat you alive. My name is Levi Mason, and I've been running freight between Phoenix and Salt Lake City since 2006. Same route, same highways, same truck stops. I could drive it blindfolded if you ask me to. Interstate 17 north out of Phoenix, merge onto I-15 at Flagstaff, straight shot through the Arizona Strip and into Utah. 10 hours door to door if traffic cooperates, which it usually does on night runs. I prefer nights, always have. Something peaceful about the desert after dark, when the heat finally breaks and the sky opens up to show you stars you can't see anywhere near a city. The roads are emptier too, which means I can make better time and get home sooner. Home being a small apartment in Holiday, just outside Salt Lake, where my girlfriend Megan waits with increasing patience for me to finally get a local job that doesn't involve 3 days a week on the highway. This story starts on a Tuesday in late October 2018. I'd picked up a load of restaurant equipment in Phoenix, industrial refrigerators, commercial ovens, that kind of thing, headed for a new hotel in Park City. The manifest said they needed it by Thursday morning, so I had plenty of time, but I wanted to get ahead of schedule. There was supposed to be weather coming in later in the week, early snow in the high country, and I didn't want to get caught in it. I left Phoenix around 8 p.m., which would put me in Salt Lake around 6 in the morning if I pushed straight through. The temperature was perfect, mid-60s, cool enough to drive with the windows cracked. I had my playlist going, mostly classic rock and old country, the kind of music my dad used to play when I was a kid riding in his truck. The first couple hours went smooth, up through Black Canyon City, through the Prescott National Forest, traffic thinning out as I gained elevation. I stopped once at a rest area near Cordis Junction, used the bathroom, grabbed a Red Bull from the vending machine. There were a few other trucks there, but nobody I recognized. Just anonymous drivers on their own anonymous routes. All of us heading somewhere, all of us alone. Back on the road, climbing higher, the air getting cooler. I could see Flagstaff's lights in the distance, that orange glow against the dark sky. The highway cut through ponderosa pine forests up here. A nice change from the saguaro and creosote of the lower desert. Even at night, you could smell the difference in the air. Pine resin and mountain cold instead of dust and heat. I merged onto I-15 around 11 p.m., heading northeast now, and that's when the desert really opened up. The Arizona Strip is one of the emptiest stretches of the interstate system. Just miles and miles of high desert plateau with nothing but sagebrush and the occasional rancher's fence. During the day, you can see the Vermilion Cliffs to the east, all those layers of red and orange rock that make you feel like you're driving through geological history. But at night, it's just darkness and the stars and the occasional pair of animal eyes reflecting in your headlights. I'd driven this stretch hundreds of times. Knew every curve, every grade, every place where the wind came howling across the plateau hard enough to push your trailer sideways. I knew that the next services were at a truck stop about 60 miles ahead, and after that, nothing until St. George, another 80 miles north. But around mile marker 315, I started noticing something strange. The highway felt different somehow. Not the pavement itself, that was the same, but the space around it. The darkness seemed deeper, the stars too bright, the silence too complete even with my windows cracked and my engine rumbling. I turned down my music, suddenly uncomfortable with the noise. In the new quiet, I could hear the wind whistling around the cab, the tick, tick, tick of my turn signal that I didn't remember turning on, the faint crackle of my CB radio, even though it was set to scan mode and finding nothing. My headlights caught something ahead on the right side of the road. A sign, but not a highway sign. Smaller, older looking, The kind of weathered wood sign you'd see outside a mom-and-pop restaurant. It was lit by a single spotlight, and as I got closer, I could read what it said. Mile 320 Diner, open 24 hours, home cooking. I'd never seen that sign before, and I'd driven past mile marker 320 hundreds of times. There was nothing there. Just empty plateau and a scenic pullout with a historical marker about Mormon pioneers or something. No diner, no restaurant, no nothing. I checked my odometer. Mile marker 320 was coming up in about 2 miles. I watched for it, curious now, and sure enough, there it was on the right side of the highway. Mile marker 320, standard green sign with white lettering, exactly where it should be. And behind it, maybe 50 yards off the highway, I could see lights. Building lights, warm and yellow, with a neon sign that flickered red and blue. A diner, an actual diner, sitting out in the middle of nowhere, in a place I was absolutely certain had been empty desert every other time I'd passed through here. I should have kept driving. Should have written it off as a mirage or a new business I somehow hadn't noticed before. But I was curious. And besides, I could use some coffee. The Red Bull from earlier had worn off, and I still had 5 hours of driving ahead of me. I put on my turn signal and started to slow down, looking for a place to pull off. There wasn't a formal exit or access road, just a wide gravel shoulder that led toward the diner. I eased my truck onto it, the tires crunching on loose stone, and followed it toward the building. As I got closer, I could see it more clearly. It was an old-style diner, the kind built in the 50s or 60s, with chrome trim and large plate glass windows. The neon sign above the door read, Mile 320 Diner, in cursive script, with a smaller sign below advertising, Coffee, Pie, open all night. The parking lot was gravel, big enough for maybe a dozen vehicles, with no other trucks or cars in sight. Light spilled from the windows, warm and inviting, and through the glass I could see the interior. Red vinyl booths, a long counter with stools, a classic jukebox in the corner. It looked perfect, like something out of an old movie. Too perfect almost. Too clean and well-maintained for a place sitting out here in the middle of nothing. I pulled into the lot and parked, leaving my engine running while I looked around. The building sat alone on the plateau, no other structures visible in any direction. No houses, no gas station, no signs of how customers were supposed to find this place or why anyone would build a diner out here with no surrounding development. But the lights were on, and through the windows I could see movement inside. Someone was definitely in there, which meant it was operational, which meant they presumably served coffee. I shut off the engine and climbed down from the cab. The wind hit me immediately, cold and sharp, carrying that distinctive high desert smell of sage and dust. The temperature had dropped significantly since Phoenix, probably in the low 40s now, and I wished I'd grabbed my jacket. But the diner was only about 20 feet away, and I'd just be inside for a few minutes. As I walked toward the entrance, I noticed how quiet everything was. No highway noise, even though I-15 was only 50 yards away. No wind sound, despite the fact that I could feel it pushing against me. Just perfect, absolute silence, like someone had wrapped the whole area in soundproofing. The front door was glass with a chrome handle, and above it hung a small bell that I assumed would jingle when I opened it. I pulled the door open and stepped inside. The bell didn't make a sound. The interior was exactly as it had appeared from outside. Classic diner layout with red vinyl booths along the windows, a long counter running down one side with chrome-topped stools, black and white checkerboard floor tiles. The jukebox in the corner was lit up, showing songs from the 50s and 60s, Elvis, Buddy Holly, Chuck Berry. But it wasn't playing anything, just sitting there silent and glowing. What struck me immediately was the temperature. Outside it had been cold, maybe 40 degrees. In here, I'd expected warmth, the stuffy heated air of a diner kitchen. Instead, it was freezing, colder inside than out, cold enough that I could see my breath, cold enough that I started shivering immediately, and it smelled wrong. Not bad exactly, but wrong. There was no smell of coffee or cooking food, no grease or spices or any of the normal diner smells. Just this flat, neutral odor like absolutely nothing, like breathing in air that had never touched anything organic. There was no one behind the counter, no waitress, no cook visible through the serving window to the kitchen, no customers in any of the booths. The place was completely empty, except for me. "Hello," I called out, my voice sounding strange and muted in the cold air. "Anyone here?" No response. I walked toward the counter, my boots squeaking on the tile floor, each step echoing in ways that didn't quite make sense. The acoustics were wrong somehow, like the sound was bouncing off walls that weren't there. On the counter sat a coffee pot, full of dark liquid, sitting on a warmer with a little red light indicating it was on. Beside it was a stack of white ceramic mugs and a small metal stand with sugar packets and creamers, everything arranged perfectly, like someone had just set it out for the morning rush. I reached out and touched the coffee pot. It was cold, ice cold, despite sitting on an active warmer. I checked the warmer. The light was definitely on, and when I held my hand over it, I could feel heat radiating up. But the coffee pot itself was freezing to the touch. "Weird," I muttered, pulling my hand back. My fingers felt numb where they'd touched the glass. I looked around the diner more carefully now, noticing other details. The menus in their little stand on the counter were old-fashioned, plastic-covered pages with typed text that looked like it had been made on an actual typewriter. The prices were current, though, $3.50 for coffee, $8.99 for a burger, reasonable, modern numbers. But the menu design itself looked like it hadn't been updated since the 60s. The booths were all spotless, the red vinyl showing no wear or cracks, the chrome trim gleaming. The salt and pepper shakers on each table were full, the sugar dispensers full, everything arranged just so. But there was a thin layer of dust on everything, like the place had been meticulously cleaned and then left undisturbed for weeks. I walked down the aisle between the counter and the booths, heading toward the back where I could see a door marked restrooms and another marked kitchen. Both doors were closed, and neither had a window to see through. As I walked, I passed the jukebox and something made me stop and look at it more closely. The selections were all oldies like I'd seen from outside, but the song titles were wrong, not quite right. Things like Hound Cat instead of Hound Dog, Johnny Angel instead of Johnny Angel, Great Balls of Flame instead of Great Balls of Fire. Close enough that you might not notice at first glance, but definitely wrong. I reached the restroom door and pushed it open. The bathroom was small but clean, with a single sink and toilet and a window that showed nothing but darkness outside. The fixtures looked vintage, but well-maintained. The mirror above the sink spotless. But like everything else, the room was freezing cold. And when I tried the sink, no water came out. The handles turned freely, making the normal squeaking sound, but the tap stayed dry. I left the bathroom and moved to the kitchen door. This one had a small circular window, the kind of porthole window you see in restaurant kitchen doors. I peered through it. The kitchen was dark, but I could make out shapes: the industrial stoves, the prep counter, the walk-in cooler. Everything you'd expect to see in a diner kitchen. But there was no one in there, and no lights on except for what spilled in from the dining area through the serving window. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The temperature dropped even more, my breath coming out in thick white clouds now. The kitchen was immaculate, every surface clean and gleaming, but the cold was almost unbearable. I could feel it seeping through my clothes, into my bones. On the prep counter, I saw something that made me pause. A plate with food on it. A burger and fries, arranged neatly, completely untouched. The burger was cut in half, showing the interior. Lettuce, tomato, cheese, perfectly assembled. The fries were golden brown and crispy looking. But everything was covered in frost. Thin white crystals coated the food, the plate, the counter around it, like someone had put a freshly made meal in a freezer for days. I reached out and touched one of the fries. It snapped in half like it was made of ice, shattering into frozen fragments that tinkled against the plate. My heart rate picked up. This was getting too weird. Time to leave, get back in my truck, get back on the highway, and forget this place existed. I turned to head back to the dining area, and that's when I saw it. On the wall beside the kitchen door, there was a calendar. One of those old-fashioned tear-off calendars where you remove a page each day. It was showing October, which was correct. The year was visible at the top, 2018, but someone had been crossing off the days. Big red X marks through each date, and the last date that had been crossed off was October 23rd. Today's date. My date. Except I was certain no one had been in this kitchen. The dust on the counters, the frost on everything, the complete absence of any human activity. It all suggested the place had been abandoned for a long time. So, who had marked today's date on the calendar? I pushed through the kitchen door back into the dining area, moving faster now, ready to leave. But as I passed one of the booths, something caught my eye. Something sitting on the table that I was sure hadn't been there when I walked past the first time. A mug of coffee, steaming hot, completely out of place in this freezing room. The ceramic was dry on the outside, no condensation, but vapor rose from the liquid inside in thin tendrils. And beside the mug was a lighter, an old Zippo, chrome finish, lying on its side on the table. The lighter was dirty, covered in fine brown dust or dirt, with what looked like sand in the crevices. I picked up the lighter carefully. It was heavy, real metal, and when I flipped it open I could see the flint wheel and wick inside. Someone had used this recently. The wick was slightly charred, and there was still fluid in it. I could smell it, that distinctive lighter fluid smell. On the side of the lighter, worn but still readable, was an engraving. LM 2018. My initials. My year. My hands started shaking and the lighter slipped from my fingers, clattering onto the table. I stepped back from the booth, my breath coming faster, my heart hammering against my ribs. This wasn't right. Nothing about this was right. The cold diner with its perfect vintage aesthetic, the frozen food, the calendar marked with today's date, and now this lighter with my initials on it. It felt like a trap, like something had been arranged specifically for me. I turned toward the front door, ready to run, and froze. There was someone sitting in one of the booths near the entrance. An old man, maybe 70 or 80, wearing a trucker jacket and a cat diesel cap. He was facing away from me, looking out the window at the parking lot completely still. He hadn't been there a moment ago. I was certain of it. The diner had been completely empty. "Excuse me," I said, my voice coming out rougher than I intended. "Do you work here? I'm looking for someone who can help me." The old man didn't respond, didn't turn around, didn't acknowledge that he'd heard me at all. Just sat there, motionless, staring out the window. I walked toward him, my footsteps seeming too loud in the silent diner. As I got closer, I could see more details. His jacket was old, faded, with patches from various trucking companies. His hands were resting on the table, weathered and spotted with age. He looked solid, real, not like a ghost or hallucination. "Sir?" I said, standing right beside his booth now. "Can you hear me?" Still no response. I reached out to tap his shoulder, and my hand passed right through him. Not through empty air, I could feel resistance, like pushing through cold gelatin. But through him, through the solid-looking fabric of his jacket and the solid-looking flesh beneath. My hand emerged on the other side, numb and aching with cold, and the old man remained unchanged, still staring out the window. I jerked my hand back, stumbling backwards, my hip hitting another table hard enough to bruise. The old man flickered slightly, like bad television reception, and then solidified again. Unchanged. That was it. I was done. I didn't care what this place was or why it existed or what any of it meant. I just needed to get out. Get back to my truck, get back to reality. I ran for the front door, grabbed the chrome handle, and pulled. The door didn't open. It didn't even budge, like it was welded shut. I pulled harder, then pushed, then pulled again, putting my full weight into it. Nothing. The door stayed closed, solid and immovable. Through the glass, I could see my truck sitting in the parking lot maybe 20 feet away. So close, but completely unreachable. I looked back at the diner. The old man was still in his booth, still staring out the window. The coffee mug sat on that other table, still steaming. The lighter sat beside it, my initials catching the light. And now, standing behind the counter, was a figure. Tall, thin, wearing what looked like a white uniform shirt and black pants. A server's uniform. But the figure was indistinct, blurry, like I was seeing it through frosted glass. It didn't move, just stood there, watching me with eyes I couldn't quite see, waiting for something. I tried the door again, yanking on it with both hands, rattling it in its frame. But it stayed shut, and through the glass I could see my truck, my freedom, just out of reach. The generator. I could hear it now, a low hum coming from somewhere outside. It had been running the whole time, I realized, powering the lights and the neon sign. But the sound had been wrong, off frequency, like machinery struggling to maintain its rhythm. I pressed my face against the cold glass, looking out at the parking lot. And that's when I noticed something that made my stomach drop. My footprints in the gravel. I could see them leading from my truck to the diner entrance. Clear impressions in the loose stone. But there were other footprints too, dozens of them, maybe hundreds, all leading toward the diner door. Different sizes, different tread patterns, suggesting different boots from different people, but none of them leading away. Every track led toward the door and stopped, like everyone who'd ever walked into this diner had simply vanished before they could walk back out. I don't know how long I stood at that door, pulling on the handle, my breath fogging the glass, watching my truck sit there in the parking lot just out of reach. Minutes, maybe, or hours. Time felt strange in that frozen diner, elastic and unreliable. Eventually, I gave up on the door and turned back to face the interior. The figure behind the counter was still there, motionless and blurred. The old man still sat in his booth, staring out at nothing. The coffee still steamed on that table, defying the freezing temperature. I needed to think. Needed to figure out what this place was and how to get out of it. Panicking wasn't going to help. I'd driven trucks for 12 years, dealt with mechanical breakdowns in the middle of nowhere, navigated through whiteout blizzards and summer dust storms. I could handle this, whatever this was. I walked back to the counter, giving the blurred figure a wide berth, and grabbed one of the menus from the stand. Maybe there was some clue in it, some information about what this place really was. The menu was exactly what you'd expect from a vintage diner. Breakfast served all day, burgers and sandwiches, blue plate specials, pie and coffee. The language was straightforward. The prices reasonable for 2018. Nothing unusual or concerning. But as I read more carefully, I started noticing small inconsistencies. The spelling was slightly off in places. Cheese instead of cheese bread instead of bread, pie instead of pie. Like whoever had typed this menu wasn't quite fluent in English, or was working from memory rather than reference. At the bottom of the last page, in small print, was a line that I almost missed. Management assumes no responsibility for lost time or altered memory. Consumption at own risk. Lost time. Altered memory. What the hell did that mean? I set the menu down and looked around the diner again, searching for any other information, any other clues. The walls were decorated with vintage memorabilia, old license plates, black and white photographs of highways and trucks from decades past, faded advertising signs for motor oil and tire brands that didn't exist anymore. One photograph caught my attention. It showed this diner, the Mile 320 diner, looking exactly as it did now. Chrome trim gleaming, neon sign lit up, several trucks and cars parked in the gravel lot. But the vehicles in the photo were from the 50s or 60s. Rounded fenders, no seat belts, that distinctive vintage aesthetic. And standing in front of the diner, posing for the camera, was a group of people. A family, maybe. 2 adults and 3 children, all dressed in 50s-style clothing, all smiling at the camera. But their faces were wrong, blurred and indistinct, like the features had been smudged before the photo could develop properly. Behind them, visible through the diner windows, I could see more blurred figures inside. Customers, presumably, though their forms were just vague human shapes, nothing detailed or recognizable. I moved to the next photograph. This one showed a truck driver standing beside his rig, which looked to be from the 70s based on the cab design. The driver's face was clearer in this photo. I could make out a beard, sunglasses, a confident smile. He was holding something up to the camera, and when I looked closely, I could see it was a lighter. A chrome Zippo, just like the one sitting on that table. The next photo showed a different truck, a different driver, this one from maybe the 80s. Same pose, same confident smile, same lighter held up to the camera. And the next photo after that, 90s truck, another driver, another lighter. I walked along the wall, looking at all the photographs, and the pattern held. Dozens of photos, different eras, different trucks, different drivers. But all of them holding up that same lighter. All of them posing in almost the exact same way. All of them looking like they were showing off something they were proud of. And in the background of every single photo, visible through the diner windows, were those blurred figures. Always present, always watching, always indistinct. My hands were going numb from the cold, my teeth starting to chatter despite my best efforts to stay calm. I needed to warm up, or at least get my blood moving. I started walking around the diner, checking every door, every window, looking for another way out. The windows didn't open. They were sealed shut, probably had been for years. The glass was thick, maybe double-paned, and when I knocked on it, the sound was dead and muffled. There was a door in the back corner marked "Office." I tried the handle and found it unlocked. The door swung open to reveal a small room with a desk, a filing cabinet, and walls covered in papers and photographs. The office was even colder than the dining area, if that was possible. My breath came out in thick clouds that hung in the air for long seconds before dissipating. I stepped inside, and the door swung shut behind me with a soft click. The desk was old metal, painted gray, with a blotter and a desk lamp and a cup full of pens. In the center of the blotter was a notebook, spiral-bound, lying open to a page filled with handwritten text. I picked up the notebook and began reading. The handwriting was cramped and hard to decipher, but I could make out most of it. Day 47. Still can't leave. Door won't open. Windows sealed. Tried breaking the glass, but nothing works. Food doesn't spoil, but tastes like nothing. Water from the tap is frozen. Temperature keeps dropping. I think I'm the only real person here. The others, they're something else. They watch me but don't interact, don't speak, don't move unless I look away. Day 48. Found the photographs on the wall. Recognized one of the trucks. It belonged to a driver named Marcus, who disappeared in 2003. His family never found out what happened to him. Is he one of the blurred figures now? Is that what happens if you stay too long? Day 49. The lighter appeared on the table today. My initials on it, just like all the others in the photos. I don't remember ever owning a Zippo, but it has my initials from this year. Like it was made for me, like this place has been waiting for me. Day 50. I tried calling for help on my CB, but there's no signal. Tried my cell phone, same thing. It's like this place exists outside of normal space, outside of normal time. The calendar on the wall keeps updating itself. Every morning, a new X mark. But I don't remember sleeping, don't remember eating, just endless cold and darkness, and waiting. Day 51. I understand now. This isn't a diner, it's a collection point, a trap. It appears at mile marker 320 for certain drivers who are meant to stop here. And once you're inside, you can't leave until you're ready to join the others. Until you're ready to become one of the blurred figures, another photograph on the wall, another lighter in the collection. Day 52. I saw myself today, in one of the windows looking out. But it wasn't a reflection. It was me, standing inside the diner, looking out at me. How can I be in two places at once? Unless time doesn't work right here. Unless past and present and future are all happening simultaneously. Day 53. The coffee stays hot. Always hot, no matter how long it sits. I've been avoiding it, but I'm so cold. So unbearably cold. Maybe if I drink it, I'll warm up. Maybe that's what I'm supposed to do. Day 54. Today, The entry stopped there, mid-sentence. The pen trailing off the page like the writer had been interrupted or had simply stopped existing. I flipped through the rest of the notebook, but all the remaining pages were blank. I set the notebook down with shaking hands and looked at the walls. They were covered in papers, delivery manifests, bills of lading, trucking company schedules. All of them showing routes that pass through mile marker 320. All of them bearing different names, different dates, going back decades. And among the papers were photographs. Not the vintage ones from the dining area, but modern ones, digital prints. Photos of trucks in the parking lot. Photos of drivers standing in front of the diner. Photos of the interior taken from different angles. In every photo, I could see those blurred figures. Sometimes in the background, sometimes in the foreground. Always present. Always watching. And in some of the more recent photos, I could see details I recognized. A cat diesel cap like the one the old man in the booth was wearing. A jacket with patches from trucking companies I knew. Faces that were almost familiar, like people I'd seen before but couldn't quite place. There was a filing cabinet in the corner. I pulled open the top drawer and found it full of folders, each one labeled with a name and date. I pulled out the first one and opened it. Inside was a driver's license, a commercial license actually, with a photo of a man in his 40s. Name, Robert Garrison. Issue date, 2015. Expiration date, 2020. Stapled to the license was a note in the same cramped handwriting from the notebook. Stopped at Mile 320 Diner, October 12, 2015, 2:40 a.m. Never reached destination. Truck found abandoned at mile marker 320. No sign of driver. Case remains open. I pulled out another folder. Another license, another note, another disappearance. and another, and another. The drawer was full of them. Dozens of drivers who'd stopped at this diner and never left. All their cases unsolved, all their trucks found empty at mile marker 320. My chest felt tight, my breathing shallow. I checked the other drawers and found more of the same. Hundreds of folders, hundreds of missing drivers, going back to the early 80s when the interstate had first been built through this area. In the bottom drawer, at the very back, I found a folder that was thicker than the others. I pulled it out and saw why. It contained multiple licenses, all with the same photo, the same name, but different dates. Marcus Rivera, the name Frank had mentioned in my last haul, the driver who'd disappeared in 2003. But there were licenses for Marcus Rivera from 95, 2000, 2003, 2008, 2012, 2015, and 2018. 7 licenses, spanning 23 years, all showing the same photo, the same face, the same age. Like he'd been frozen in time, repeatedly coming back to get new licenses even though he'd disappeared decades ago. Or maybe he'd never really disappeared at all. Maybe he was still here, somewhere in this diner. One of those blurred figures or one of the faces in the photographs or one of the names in the notebook. I slammed the drawer shut and backed away from the filing cabinet. This was too much, too overwhelming. I needed to get out, needed to find a way to break free from this place before I became another folder in that cabinet. Another unsolved case. Another driver who stopped at mile 320 and never reached his destination. The door to the office opened behind me, and I spun around, my heart leaping into my throat. No one was there, just the empty dining area, the frozen stillness, the blurred figure still standing behind the counter. But on the table nearest to the office door, there was now a second mug of coffee. Steaming hot, just like the first one. And beside it, another lighter. Chrome Zippo, identical to the one I'd found earlier. I walked into the dining area on shaking legs and picked up the lighter. Same weight, same feel, same engraving on the side. LM 2018. I flipped it open and spun the wheel. A flame sprang to life, bright and warm in the freezing air. I held it for a moment, feeling the heat on my fingers, then closed it with a snap. The old man in the booth was gone. The seat was empty, no indication he'd ever been there. But now there was someone in a different booth, closer to the center of the room. A woman this time, maybe 50 years old, wearing a diner uniform. She sat facing away from me, motionless, staring at the wall. I walked toward her, the lighter clutched in my hand, and as I got closer I could see that she was holding something. A coffee mug, raised halfway to her lips, frozen in the act of taking a sip. Her face was clearer than the old man's had been. I could make out individual features, the lines around her eyes, the shape of her nose. But her expression was blank, empty, like there was nothing behind her eyes. "Who are you?" I whispered, even though I knew she wouldn't answer. "What are you?" She didn't move, didn't blink, just sat there with that mug raised, forever about to take a sip that would never come. I reached out slowly and touched her shoulder. This time, my hand didn't pass through. I felt solid fabric, solid flesh beneath. But the moment I made contact, she vanished. Just blinked out of existence like a light switching off, leaving behind only the empty booth and the coffee mug sitting on the table, still steaming. I stumbled backwards, the lighter falling from my hand and clattering on the tile floor. The sound echoed strangely, lasting too long, bouncing off surfaces that shouldn't reflect sound that way. When I looked up, the dining area was no longer empty. Every booth was occupied now, every stool at the counter. Dozens of figures, all sitting in perfect stillness, all facing different directions, all blurred and indistinct. Some wore modern clothes, others vintage outfits from decades past. Some looked solid, others translucent like smoke. And all of them, every single one, was holding a lighter. Chrome Zippos, all identical, all engraved with initials and years, all belonging to drivers who'd stopped here and never left. The blurred figure behind the counter moved for the first time. It reached out. I could see an arm extending, a hand grasping, and picked up the coffee pot. It poured coffee into a mug that I hadn't noticed before, filling it to the brim, steam rising. Then it set the pot down and pushed the mug across the counter toward me. An offering, an invitation. I looked at the mug, at the dark liquid inside, at the steam rising in delicate spirals. Part of me wanted to drink it, wanted that warmth in my frozen body, wanted to end the terrible cold that had been seeping into my bones since I'd entered this place. But I remembered the notebook, the warning about consumption. I remembered those folders full of missing drivers. I remembered the blurred figures all around me, holding their lighters, trapped in this place forever. "No," I said, my voice coming out stronger than I felt. "I'm not drinking that. I'm not staying here." The figure behind the counter didn't react, just stood there motionless again, like it had never moved at all. I walked to the front door and tried it again. Still locked, still immovable. I walked around the entire perimeter of the diner, checking every window, every door, every possible exit. All of them sealed, all of them impossible to open. I was trapped, just like all the others had been trapped. Just like Marcus Rivera and Robert Garrison and the dozens, hundreds of other drivers who'd made the mistake of stopping at mile 320. The generator outside was louder now, its irregular rhythm more pronounced. The lights flickered slightly, in sync with the engine stuttering, and in those moments of near darkness, I could see the figures more clearly, could see their faces, their expressions, the terror frozen on some of them, the resignation on others. They'd all tried to leave, all tried to resist, and they'd all failed. I sank down into one of the empty booths, my legs giving out, my energy draining away. The cold was overwhelming now, numbing my extremities, slowing my thoughts. I could feel myself starting to shut down, my body going into survival mode, conserving heat and energy. The coffee sat on the counter, still steaming, still waiting. I might have sat in that booth for minutes or hours or days. Time had stopped meaning anything. The cold had seeped so deep into my body that I'd stopped shivering, which I knew was a bad sign. Hypothermia sets in stages, and when you stop shivering, you're in the danger zone. But I couldn't bring myself to move. Couldn't bring myself to do anything except sit there and watch the steam rise from that coffee mug on the counter. The figures around me remained frozen in their various poses, and I wondered how long they'd been like that. How long before I'd join them? Just another blurred shape sitting in a booth, holding a lighter, trapped in eternal stillness. My phone was in my truck, which might as well have been on the moon for all the good it did me. I'd left it charging in the cup holder, planning to be gone from this place in 5 minutes, 10 at most. Just grab some coffee and hit the road. Such a simple, stupid decision that had led to this nightmare. I forced myself to stand up, my joints aching, my muscles stiff. If I was going to get out of here, I needed to keep moving, needed to keep my blood flowing. I walked toward the kitchen, thinking maybe there was a back door I'd missed, some service entrance that wasn't locked. As I pushed through the kitchen door, the temperature dropped even further. I could see frost forming on the stainless steel surfaces, ice crystals spreading across the prep counters like living things. The burger and fries I'd seen earlier were completely frozen now, encased in ice, no longer recognizable as food. The walk-in cooler door was slightly ajar, and through the gap I could see more light than there should be. Not the dim interior light you'd expect from a cooler, but bright, almost blinding white light spilling out around the edges of the door. I approached it carefully, every instinct screaming at me to turn around, to leave it alone. But where else was I going to go? I'd checked every other exit, every other option. This was all that was left. I grabbed the cooler's handle and pulled. The door swung open, and I had to shield my eyes from the brightness. When my vision adjusted, I saw something that made my rational mind rebel against what I was seeing. The cooler wasn't a cooler. It was a hallway. A long corridor stretching back into impossible distance, lined with doors on both sides, lit by fluorescent tubes that hummed and flickered. The walls were the same white tile as the diner, but they extended far beyond where the building's exterior walls should be. This space couldn't exist. Not inside the small diner structure I'd seen from outside. But here it was anyway, defying geometry and physics and common sense. I stepped into the hallway and the temperature changed again. Not warmer, but different. The cold was sharp now, cutting, like walking into a freezer set below zero. Each breath felt like inhaling knives. The doors along the hallway were numbered. 321, 320.2, 323, and so on. Each one had a small window set at eye level, and through them I could see rooms, small spaces, maybe 10 feet square, each one containing a single person sitting at a small table with a cup of coffee. They weren't blurred like the figures in the diner. They were clear, detailed, solid-looking. Real people, or they had been once. Now they just sat there, unmoving, staring at their coffee cups, frozen in time like insects in amber. I recognized one of them. Door 32047, a man in his 50s with a graying beard and a flannel shirt. I'd seen his photo in one of those folders in the office. Robert Garrison, disappeared 2015, and here he was, sitting at his table, looking exactly as he had in his license photo, not aged a day in 3 years. I moved down the hallway, looking through each window, seeing more familiar faces. The old man who'd been sitting in the booth, he was here in room 320-12. The woman in the diner uniform, room 320-9. Dozens of others, maybe hundreds, all sitting with their coffee, all trapped in these tiny rooms, all waiting for something that would never come. At the end of the hallway was a larger door, unmarked, with no window. It was slightly ajar, and through the gap I could hear something. Not voices exactly, but a sound like many voices layered over each other, speaking in unison but at different pitches, creating a chorus that was almost musical but deeply unsettling. I pushed the door open and stepped into a large circular room. The walls were lined with shelves, and on every shelf sat a lighter. Thousands of them, maybe tens of thousands, all chrome Zippos, all arranged in neat rows. Each one engraved with initials and a year. Each one representing a driver who'd stopped here and never left. In the center of the room was a table, and on the table was a map. Not a modern map, but an old paper one, the kind gas stations used to give away for free. It showed the southwestern United States, highways marked in red, cities in black, and scattered across the map were pins with small flags attached. Hundreds of pins, marking locations all along the interstate system. Mile marker 320 on I-15 had a pin, but so did dozens of other locations. Mile marker 187 on Highway 95. Mile marker 441 on I-40. Mile marker 93 on Highway 50. All of them in remote desert locations. All of them in places where a diner shouldn't exist, but apparently did anyway. This wasn't just one location. It was many locations, or maybe the same location appearing in many places. A trap laid across the entire desert highway system, catching drivers who made the mistake of stopping. The layered voices were louder in here, coming from everywhere and nowhere. I could almost make out words now, phrases that rose out of the chorus and then sank back into it. Never leave. Always hungry. collection grows. Welcome home. Drink the coffee. I backed toward the door, not wanting to hear any more. But as I turned to leave, I saw something that stopped me cold. On a shelf near the door, at eye level, was a lighter. Chrome Zippo, just like all the others. But this one was newer than the rest, the metal still shiny, not yet dulled by time. I picked it up and read the engraving, LM 2018. My lighter. My initials, my year. It was already here, already part of the collection, as if my fate had been decided before I'd even stopped at this place. I tried to drop it, to throw it away, but my fingers wouldn't open. My hand clutched the lighter like it was fused to my palm, the metal cold enough to burn but impossible to release. The voices grew louder, more insistent. Drink the coffee. Warm yourself. End the cold. Join us. Stay forever. I ran back down the hallway, past all those rooms with their frozen occupants, back toward the kitchen. But the hallway was longer now, stretching on endlessly, the doors multiplying as I ran. 321, 322, 323, counting up and up. Hundreds of numbers. Thousands. And through each window I saw the same thing. A person at a table, a cup of coffee, eternal stillness. Some of the rooms had been occupied for decades, judging by the vintage clothes the people wore. Others looked recent, modern clothing and hairstyles, people who might have disappeared just days or weeks ago. I burst through the kitchen door back into the dining area, gasping for breath, my lungs burning from the cold. The lighter was still in my hand, still impossible to drop, its weight a constant reminder of what was waiting for me. The diner had changed. The booths were all full now, completely packed with those blurred figures. They sat shoulder to shoulder, crowding the space, all of them holding their lighters, all of them watching me with their not quite visible eyes. And standing in the center of the room, blocking my path to the front door, was a figure that was clearer than the others. Solid, detailed, real. It was me, or a version of me, wearing the same clothes I was wearing, same build, same face, but older somehow, worn down, eyes hollow and defeated. This version of me was holding a coffee mug, raising it to his lips, about to drink. "Don't," I said, my voice hoarse and raspy. "Don't drink it." The other me didn't respond, just brought the mug to his lips and tipped it back, drinking deep. I could see his throat working, swallowing the dark liquid, and as he did, he began to blur. His edges softened, his features became indistinct, his solidity faded until he was just another transparent figure among the dozens filling the booths. He lowered the empty mug and looked at me, or through me, with eyes that no longer saw. Then he turned and walked to an empty booth, sat down, placed his lighter on the table, and became perfectly still. Another addition to the collection, another driver trapped forever. The figures in the other booths all raised their lighters in unison, a silent salute welcoming their newest member. Then they returned to their frozen poses, waiting for the next arrival, the next victim. I backed away toward the kitchen, keeping my eyes on that version of me sitting in the booth. Was that my future? Was that what I would become if I stayed here long enough? If the cold and the isolation and the relentless pressure finally broke my will to resist? The coffee on the counter was still there, still steaming. I could smell it now, finally. A rich, complex aroma that cut through the cold air like a promise of warmth and comfort. Part of me wanted it desperately, wanted to end this suffering, wanted to give in and accept whatever fate this place had planned for me. But another part, a deeper, more primal part, refused. I wasn't ready to become one of the blurred figures, wasn't ready to give up and fade into this nightmare. I needed to find another way out. There had to be something I'd missed, some trick or loophole or weak point in whatever held this place together. No trap was perfect. Every system had a failure point. The generator outside stuttered again, and the lights dimmed for a moment. In that brief darkness, I saw something I hadn't noticed before. The neon sign outside, Mile 320 Diner, was flickering in a pattern, not random, but rhythmic, almost like Morse code. Long flash, short flash, short flash, long flash. I watched it through the window, counting the flashes, trying to make sense of it. The pattern repeated over and over. Long, short, short, long, pause, short, long, short, pause, long, short, long, long. It took me a minute to work it out, my cold, slowed brain struggling with the puzzle. But finally, I had it. L-O-S-T, lost. The sign was spelling out lost over and over. A warning, or maybe a description of everyone who'd come here. We were all lost. All of us who'd made the mistake of stopping. All of us trapped in this impossible place between reality and nightmare. But if the sign could spell words, that meant something was controlling it. Something or someone was trying to communicate, even if just to mock us with our situation. I walked to the jukebox in the corner. It was still lit up, still showing its list of almost right song titles, still silent despite its glowing presence. I studied it more carefully now, looking at the selection buttons, the coin slot, the internal mechanism visible through the glass front. There was something wrong with the way it was wired. The cables inside didn't connect properly. They ran into the body of the machine, but didn't seem to connect to anything. Like it was just for show, a prop that looked functional but served no actual purpose. I grabbed it with both hands and tried to pull it away from the wall. It was heavy, easily 200 pounds, but it moved slightly when I yanked hard enough. I pulled again, putting my back into it, and it scraped across the floor, revealing the wall behind. There was writing on the wall, scratched into the paint with something sharp. Dozens of messages carved one over another. Some fresh and deep, others worn and faded. No exit. Been here 30 days. Help us. Time doesn't work. The coffee is the key. Don't drink it. Drink it and leave. Marcus was here. 2003 to 2015. They're not real. We're not real. And at the bottom, larger than the rest, carved so deep the drywall beneath was visible. Break the pattern. Break the pattern. But what pattern? The coffee? The lighters? The endless cycle of drivers stopping and staying and eventually giving up. I thought about everything I'd seen. The calendar marking today's date. The lighter with my initials. The version of myself drinking the coffee and fading away. The rooms full of trapped drivers. The map showing all the locations where this diner appeared. It was all connected, all part of a system. A machine designed to collect and trap and hold. And like any machine, it had rules, patterns, predictable behaviors. The coffee stayed hot forever. The door stayed locked. The figures appeared and disappeared. The generator kept running outside, all of it maintaining the illusion, maintaining the trap. But what if I broke one of the rules? What if I did something the pattern didn't expect? I walked to the counter and picked up the coffee mug. The one that had been sitting there since I'd first entered, still steaming, still waiting. I carried it to the front door and stood there, holding it, looking out at my truck so close and yet unreachable. Then I raised the mug and poured the coffee onto the floor. The moment the first drop hit the tile, everything changed. Not dramatically, no explosion or flash of light or sudden release. Just a subtle shift, like reality hiccuping, skipping a frame. The coffee didn't splash or spread when it hit the floor. It soaked in instantly, disappearing into the tile like the floor was absorbing it, drinking it down, hungry for it. I poured out more, watching it vanish the moment it made contact, and with each drop that disappeared, I felt something change in the air around me. The temperature rose slightly, just a degree or two, but after hours of unbearable cold, it felt like standing in front of a bonfire. I poured faster, emptying the mug onto the floor, and the warmth increased, spreading through my frozen limbs, bringing feeling back to my numb fingers. The blurred figures in the booths began to fade. Not all at once, but gradually, like fog burning off in sunlight. One by one, they became more transparent, more ghost-like, until they were barely visible at all. And as they faded, I could hear sounds. Faint, distant, like voices calling from far away. Maybe they were saying something, warning me or thanking me or cursing me. I couldn't tell. The last drops fell from the mug, and when they hit the floor, I felt, rather than heard, something break. Like a glass pane shattering somewhere deep underground, the sound more vibration than noise. The diner shuddered, the walls creaking, the floor tilting slightly beneath my feet. I tried the door again. This time, when I pulled, it opened. Just like that, no resistance, swinging outward into the cold desert night like it had never been locked at all. I didn't wait to see what would happen next. I ran to my truck, fumbling for my keys, my hands still clumsy from the cold but functioning well enough to unlock the door and climb inside. The interior smelled like home. Diesel fuel and old coffee and the pine tree air freshener hanging from my mirror. Normal smells from a normal life I wasn't sure I'd ever see again. I started the engine, and it fired right up. No hesitation, no problems. I threw it in gear and accelerated, spraying gravel, getting back onto the highway shoulder, merging onto I-15 like I was fleeing a crime scene. In my mirrors, I could see the diner receding behind me, its lights still on, the neon sign still flickering. But it looked different now, faded somehow, less solid, like it was becoming transparent, phasing out of reality. As I watched, it disappeared. Not gradually, just gone. One moment it was there. The next moment there was nothing but empty desert and darkness. No building, no lights, no sign that anything had ever existed at mile marker 320 except sagebrush and sand. I drove for an hour straight without stopping, my hands locked on the wheel, my eyes straight ahead, refusing to look back. The highway stretched out normally in front of me, mile markers appearing in proper sequence. No strange exits or impossible buildings, just regular interstate, regular desert, regular reality. Around 4 a.m. I pulled into a truck stop outside St. George. The place was well lit and busy, a dozen other trucks in the lot, normal people living normal lives. I parked and just sat for a while, letting the normalcy wash over me, grounding myself in the mundane details of the real world. My phone was where I'd left it, sitting in the cup holder, fully charged. I checked the time, 4:17 a.m. I'd left Phoenix around 8 p.m. the previous evening. That meant I'd lost about 8 hours somewhere, if my math was right. But I couldn't account for where those hours had gone. The drive from Phoenix to St. George should have taken maybe 7 hours, but somehow it had taken 15. I checked my GPS history, and it showed my route clearly. Phoenix to Flagstaff to I-15 north. But at mile marker 320, there was a gap. The tracking just stopped. For 8 hours, according to the log, I'd been stationary at mile marker 320, not moving at all. Then the tracking resumed, showing me continuing north as if nothing had happened. I called Megan, needing to hear another human voice, needing to confirm that I was really back in the normal world. She answered on the third ring, sounding groggy and confused. "Levi, what time is it?" "Early," I said. "I'm sorry, I needed to hear your voice. Are you okay? You sound weird. I'm fine, just a long night, strange run. Where are you? Utah. Almost there. Should be home by this afternoon. Okay. She yawned. Drive safe. Love you. Love you too. I hung up and sat there in the parking lot, watching the sky gradually lighten in the east. The sunrise was normal, beautiful even. Orange and pink spreading across the horizon, painting the desert in warm colors. No strange effects, no time distortions, just a regular dawn following a regular night. Except it hadn't been regular. I knew what I'd experienced, what I'd seen. That diner was real, or as real as something like that could be, and it was still out there, somewhere, waiting for the next driver to make the mistake of stopping. I reached into my pocket, intending to pull out my phone again, and felt something cold and metallic. I pulled it out and looked at it, my stomach dropping. The lighter. The chrome Zippo with my initials engraved on the side. LM 2018. I'd left it in the diner, I was sure of it. I'd dropped it when that version of myself had appeared. And I'd run without picking it up. There was no way it could be in my pocket. But here it was, solid and real, heavy in my palm. I flipped it open and spun the wheel, and a flame appeared, bright and steady in the pre-dawn darkness. I closed it quickly and shoved it back in my pocket, not wanting to look at it anymore. But I could feel its weight there, a constant reminder of where I'd been, what had happened. I completed my delivery in Park City that afternoon, dropping off the restaurant equipment at the new hotel. The receiving clerk signed off on everything, made small talk about the weather, acted completely normal. Like this was just another Tuesday, another delivery, nothing unusual or remarkable about it. I checked into a motel near the Salt Lake Airport and slept for 12 hours straight. When I woke up, I immediately checked my pocket. The lighter was still there, still cold, still engraved with my initials. I tried to throw it away, tossed it in the motel trash can, in a dumpster behind the building, in a public garbage bin at a rest stop on my way home. But each time I'd check my pockets later and find it there again, like it was magnetically drawn to me, like I couldn't get rid of it no matter what I did. After a week, I stopped trying, just accepted that I was stuck with it, that it was mine now whether I wanted it or not. The strange thing is, I kept driving that road. Phoenix to Salt Lake, same highway, same mile markers, 3 times a week for the next several months. I told myself I was watching for it, making sure the diner didn't appear again, warning other drivers if it did. But that was a lie. Truth was, I was looking for it. Wanted to see it again. Wanted to understand what had happened to me in that impossible place. Every time I approached mile marker 320, my heart rate would spike. I'd slow down, watching the roadside carefully, scanning for any sign of gravel pull-off or building lights or that neon sign. But there was never anything there, just empty desert, exactly as it should be. Until one night in February, about 4 months after my first experience. I was running the same route, same time of night, same conditions. And as I approached mile marker 320, I saw it. Not the diner this time, but a light. A single point of light out in the desert, maybe a quarter mile off the highway, stationary and steady. I slowed down, trying to get a better look, and the light blinked. Once, twice, 3 times. Long, short, short, long, L in Morse code. The same pattern I'd seen in the diner's neon sign. I pulled over to the shoulder and sat there, engine idling, watching that distant light. It blinked again. Same pattern. Like it was calling to me, like it wanted me to come investigate. I could have driven away, should have. But instead, I found myself reaching for the lighter in my pocket, pulling it out, flipping it open. The flame reflected in my side mirror, and in that reflection, I saw something that made my blood run cold. There was someone sitting in my passenger seat. I could see them in the mirror, blurred and indistinct, but definitely there. When I looked over directly, the seat was empty, but in the mirror the figure remained, watching me with eyes I couldn't quite see. I closed the lighter and the figure vanished from the mirror. When I opened it again, the figure returned. Open, closed, open, closed. Each time I struck a flame, the figure appeared. Each time I extinguished it, the figure disappeared. I put the lighter back in my pocket and pulled back onto the highway, accelerating hard, leaving mile marker 320 behind. The distant light remained visible in my mirrors for a long time, still blinking, still calling. Since then, I've seen the light a dozen more times, always at mile marker 320, always at night, always blinking the same pattern. Sometimes it's far away, sometimes closer to the highway. Once, it was right at the roadside, bright enough to light up the interior of my cab as I drove past. And each time, when I check my passenger seat mirror, I see that figure sitting there. Not always the same figure. Sometimes it's the old man from the diner, sometimes the woman in the uniform, sometimes other faces I don't recognize. But they're always there when the lighter is burning, always watching, always waiting. I've started taking different routes now. Longer paths that avoid I-15 entirely, adding hours to my trips but keeping me away from mile marker 320. Megan notices, asks why I'm coming home later than I used to. I tell her traffic has been bad, that I'm trying new routes to avoid construction. She doesn't believe me. I can see it in her eyes, but she doesn't push. Last week, I found something in my truck that I can't explain. Sitting in my cup holder when I returned from a delivery was a coffee mug. White ceramic, with Mile 320 Diner printed on the side in faded letters. It was full of coffee, steaming hot, despite the fact that my truck had been parked in a secured lot for 3 hours. I poured the coffee out onto the pavement, just like I'd done in the diner. It soaked in immediately, disappearing without a trace. But the mug remained, and it's in my truck now, sitting on the dash where I can see it. A reminder, a warning, a promise. Because I know, with absolute certainty, that I'm going back. Maybe not tomorrow, maybe not next week, but eventually, I'll see that light blinking at mile marker 320 and I won't be able to resist. I'll pull over, I'll walk into that desert, and I'll find whatever is out there waiting for me. The lighter in my pocket gets heavier every day. The mug on my dash seems to move when I'm not looking directly at it, always staying visible in my peripheral vision no matter where I sit. And in my mirrors, even without the lighter's flame, I sometimes catch glimpses of those figures, sitting in my passenger seat, standing beside my truck at rest stops, visible for just a moment before disappearing. They're waiting for me. I know that now. The diner didn't let me go. It just let me leave. There's a difference. And sooner or later, I'll understand what that difference means. Megan asked me last night if I was okay, if something was bothering me. I almost told her everything. About the diner, about the lighter, about the light that keeps calling me back. But what would I say? How do you explain something like that to someone who's never experienced it? So I lied, said I was fine, just tired from the long hauls. She looked at me for a long time, then kissed my forehead and went to bed. I sat up alone in our living room, holding the lighter, watching its flame dance in the darkness. And on my phone, which I was certain I'd left in the bedroom, a notification appeared. A calendar reminder that I definitely didn't create. Return to mile 320, Friday, 2:40 a.m. 2 days from now. I tried to delete it, but 3 more appeared immediately, scheduled for every Friday at 2:40 a.m. stretching months into the future. I turned off the phone, but when I turned it back on an hour later, the reminders were still there, waiting. Yesterday, I drove past mile marker 320 during the day. The sun was bright. The desert looked normal, no sign of anything unusual. But when I looked at my GPS, it showed a pin dropped at that exact location. Zoomed in, the pin was labeled "Home, visit soon, home." That's what it called the diner. Home. And the terrible thing is, part of me agrees. Part of me remembers that cold diner with something almost like fondness, like nostalgia for a place where time stopped and decisions didn't matter and everything was frozen in eternal present. Tonight is Thursday. Tomorrow is Friday. I have a load scheduled for Saturday morning, Phoenix to Salt Lake, my regular route, which means I'll be passing mile marker 320 tomorrow night, right around 2:40 a.m. if I keep my usual pace. I could refuse the load, could call in sick, take a different route, drive during the day instead of at night. But I know it won't matter. The diner will find me. The light will appear wherever I am, blinking its message, calling me home. Megan is asleep in the next room. I can hear her breathing, steady and peaceful, unaware of any of this. Tomorrow, I'll kiss her goodbye and climb into my truck and head south, like always. And when I reach mile marker 320, I'll see that light. And this time, I think I'll stop. Not because I want to, but because the lighter in my pocket is burning now. Even though it's closed, even though there's no flame visible, I can feel it, hot against my thigh, growing warmer with each passing hour. And the mug on my dash is full again, steaming, though I poured it out this morning. The pattern is reasserting itself. Whatever I broke when I poured out that first coffee, whatever rule I violated to escape, it's being fixed now. The system is correcting itself, drawing me back in, making sure the collection is complete. In my mirrors right now, as I sit here writing this, I can see them. All of them. The old man, the woman, the version of myself that drank the coffee. Dozens of blurred figures filling my apartment somehow, standing behind my chair, surrounding me. They don't move or speak. They just watch, waiting. The lighter is hot enough now that it's burning through my pocket, scorching my skin. But when I reach for it, wanting to throw it across the room, my hand stops. Won't move. Won't let me get rid of it. The calendar on my phone chimes. A notification. Return to mile 320, tonight 2:40 a.m. It's only 11 p.m. now, but when I look at my watch it shows 2:39. And outside my window, where our apartment parking lot should be, I see something else. Gravel. Desert. And in the distance, lights. Warm yellow lights from a building that shouldn't exist, that can't exist, but does anyway. The mile 320 diner. It's not at mile marker 320 anymore. It's here, or I'm there. Or we were always in the same place and I just didn't realize it. Megan is still sleeping in the next room. Will still be sleeping there when I leave. Or maybe she never existed at all. Maybe this apartment, this life, was just the space between visits, the illusion I lived in while waiting to return to where I actually belong. I'm standing now, though I don't remember standing. Walking toward the door, though I don't remember deciding to walk. The lighter is in my hand, open, flame burning steady and bright. In the flame's reflection, I can see my face, but it's blurring around the edges, features becoming indistinct, like looking at myself through frosted glass. The door opens, I don't remember opening it, and the cold night air rushes in. Not apartment air, desert air. Sage and dust and endless space. The diner is closer now, just across the parking lot, or the gravel lot, or the desert floor. The distance keeps changing, but the destination stays the same. Through the windows I can see them all. Every driver who ever stopped at mile 320, every person who ever made the mistake I made. They're sitting in the booths, standing at the counter, all of them holding their lighters, all of them waiting for me to join them. And on the counter, visible even from here, is a fresh cup of coffee. Still steaming, still waiting, still exactly the right temperature, because temperature doesn't mean anything in a place where time doesn't exist. I'm walking toward it now. Each step feels lighter than the last, like I'm shedding weight with every footfall, shedding memories, shedding attachments, shedding everything that tied me to the world I'm leaving behind. The door to the diner opens before I reach it. The bell still doesn't ring. The cold interior air feels like coming home. I walk to the counter, pick up the coffee mug, and raise it to my lips. The liquid touches my tongue, and I taste everything I've lost. Every mile I've driven, every morning I woke up, every conversation with Megan, every decision that led me here. All of it compressed into this single moment of perfect, eternal present. I drink it down, and as I do, I feel myself joining them, becoming part of the collection, adding my lighter to the thousands already gathered, my face to the photographs on the wall, my entry to the logbook that never stops collecting names. The last thing I see before everything blurs and fades is my own truck sitting in the parking lot. The door is open, the interior light on, and someone is climbing into the driver's seat. Someone who looks exactly like me, solid and real, ready to complete the delivery to Salt Lake that I'll never finish. He starts the engine and pulls away, heading north on I-15, continuing the route while I stay here, frozen at mile marker 320 forever. And every Friday at 2:40 a.m., that version of me, or some version of me, will pass this spot. We'll see the light blinking in the desert. We'll feel the lighter burning in his pocket. And eventually, he'll stop. They always stop. We all do.